The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Book 2, Part 2, The Archaic Symbolism of the World Religions. Section 23, The Upanishads in Gnostic Literature. We are reminded in King's Gnostics that the Greek language has but one word for vowel and voice, and this has led the uninitiated to many erroneous interpretations. Of that well-known fact, a comparison may be attempted, and a flood of light thrown upon several mystic meanings. Thus the words so often used in the Upanishads and the Puranas, sound and speech, may be collated with the Gnostic vowels and the voices of the thunders and angels in Revelation. The same will be found in Pishtis Sophia and other ancient fragments and manuscripts. This was remarked even by the matter-of-fact author of the Gnostics and their remains. Through Hippolytus, an early church father, we learned that Marcus, a Pythagorean rather than a Christian Gnostic, and a Kabbalist most certainly, had received in mystic revelation. It is said that Marcus had it revealed unto him that the 7 heavens sounded each one vowel, which, all combined together, formed a complete doxology. Note, the heavens are identical with angels, as already stated. End of note. In clear words, the sound whereof being carried down from these 7 heavens to earth became the creator and parent of all things that be on earth. See Hippolytus 6:48 and King's Gnostics, page 200. Translated from the occult phraseology into still plainer language, this would read, the 7-fold Logos having differentiated into 7 logoi, or creative potencies, vowels, these, the second Logos, or sound, created all on earth. Assuredly, one who is acquainted with Gnostic literature can hardly help seeing in St. John's Apocalypse a work of the same school of thought. For we find John saying in chapter 10, verses 3 and 4, 7 thunders uttered their voices, and I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven, saying unto me, Seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not. The same injunction is given to Marcus, the same to all other semi and full initiates. Yet the sameness of equivalent expressions used and of the underlying ideas always betrays a portion of the mysteries. We must always seek for more than one meaning in every mystery allegorically revealed, especially in those in which the number 7 and its multiplication 7 by 7, or 49, appear. Now when the Rabbi Jesus is requested in Pishtis Sophia by his disciples to reveal to them the mysteries of the light of thy, his Father, that is, of the higher self enlightened by initiation and divine knowledge, Jesus answers, Do ye seek after these mysteries? No mysteries is more excellent than they which shall bring your souls unto the light of lights, unto the place of truth and goodness, unto the place where there is neither male nor female, neither form in that place but light everlasting, not to be uttered. Nothing, therefore, is more excellent than the mysteries which ye seek after, saving only the mystery of the 7 vowels and their 49 powers, and their numbers thereof, and no name is more excellent than all these vowels. The 7 fathers and the 49 sons blaze in darkness, but they are the life and light, and the continuation thereof through the great age, says the commentary, speaking of the fires. Now it becomes evident that in every esoteric interpretation of exoteric beliefs expressed in allegorical form, there was the same underlying idea, the basic number 7, the compound of 3 and 4, preceded by the divine 3, making the perfect number 10. Also, these numbers applied equally to divisions of time, to cosmography, metaphysical and physical, as well as to man and everything else in visible nature. Thus these 7 vowels with their 49 powers are identical with the 3 and the 7 fires of the Hindus and their 49 fires, identical with the numerical mysteries of the Persian Simurgh, identical with those of the Jewish Kabbalists, the latter dwarfing the numbers, their mode of blinds, made the duration of each successive renewal, what we call in esoteric parlance round, or the 7 renewals of the globe only of 7,000 years instead of, as is more likely, 7 billion, and assigned to the total duration of the universe 49,000 years only. Compare the section Chronology of the Brahmins. Now, the secret doctrine furnishes a key which reveals to us on indisputable grounds of comparative analogy that Garuda, the allegorical and monstrous half-man and half-bird, the Vahan or vehicle on which Vishnu, who is Kala, time, is shown to ride. It is the origin of all other such allegories. He is the Indian phoenix, the emblem of cyclic and periodical time, the man-lion, Singha, of whose representations the so-called Gnostic gems are so full. Note, as confessed by King, the great authority on Gnostic antiquities, these Gnostic gems are not the work of the Gnostics but belong to pre-Christian periods and are the work of magicians. On page 241, end of note. Over the 7 rays of the lion's crown, and corresponding to their points, stand in many cases the 7 vowels of the Greek alphabet: alpha, epsilon, eta, iota, omicron, upsilon, and omega, testifying to the 7 heavens. This is the solar lion and the emblem of the solar cycle, as Garuda is that of the great cycle, the Mahakalpa, co-eternal with Vishnu, and also, of course, the emblem of the sun and solar cycle. Note on Garuda, the lack of intuition in Orientalists and antiquarians, past and present, is remarkable. Thus Wilson, the translator of Vishnu Purana, declares in his preface that in the Garuda Purana he found no account of the birth of Garuda, considering that an account of creation in general is given therein, and that Garuda is co-eternal with Vishnu, the Mahakalpa, or great life cycle, beginning with and ending with the manifesting Vishnu. What other account of Garuda's birth could be expected? End of note. This is shown by the details of the allegory. At his birth, Garuda is mistaken for Agni, the god of fire, on account of his, Garuda's, dazzling splendor, and called thereupon Ganganeshwara, Lord of the Sky. Again, his being represented as Osiris, and by many heads of allegorical masters on the Abraxas, Gnostics, gems, with the head and beak of an eagle or a hawk, solar birds, denotes Garuda's solar and cyclic character. His son is Jatabu, the cycle of 60,000 years, as well remarked by C.W. King. Whatever the primary meaning of the gem with the solar lion and the vowels, it was probably imported in its present shape from India, that true fountainhead of Gnostic iconography. From Gnostics, page 218. The mysteries of the 7 Gnostic vowels uttered by the thunders of St. John can be unriddled only by the primeval and original occultism of Aryavarta, brought into India by the primeval Brahmins who had been initiated in Central Asia. And this is the occultism we study and try to explain as much as possible in these pages. Our doctrine of 7 races and 7 rounds of life and evolution around our terrestrial chain of spheres may be found even in Revelation. Note, read Revelation chapter 17 verses 2 and 10, and Leviticus chapter 23 verses 15 to 18. The first passage speaking of the 7 kings, of whom 5 have gone, and the second about the 7 Sabbaths, etc. End of note. When the 7 thunders or sounds or vowels, one meaning out of the 7 for each such vowel relating directly to our own earth, and its 7 root races in each round, had uttered their voices, but forbidden the sea to write them, and made him seal up those things, what did the angel standing upon the sea and upon the earth do? He lifted his hand to heaven, and sware by him that liveth for ever and ever, that there should be time no longer. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God of the cycle should be finished. Chapter 10, verse 7, which means, in theosophic phraseology, that when the 7th round is completed, then time will cease. There shall be time no longer, very naturally, since pralaya shall set in, and there will remain no one on earth to keep a division of time during that periodical dissolution and arrest of conscious life. Dr. Kinley and others believed this doctrine of the rabbins, their calculations of cyclic 7 and 49, to have been brought by them from Chaldea. This is more than likely. But the Babylonians, who had all those cycles and taught them only at the great initiatory mysteries of astrological magic, got the wisdom and learning from India. It is not difficult, therefore, to recognize in them our own esoteric doctrine. In their secret computations, the Japanese have the same figures in their cycles. As to the Brahmins, their Puranas and Upanishads are a good proof of it. The latter have passed entirely into Gnostic literature, and a Brahmin needs only to read Pistis Sophia to recognize his forefathers' property, even to the phraseology and similes used. Note, Pistis Sophia is an extremely important document, a genuine evangel of the Gnostics, ascribed at random to Valentinus, but much more probably a pre-Christian work in its original. It was discovered in a Coptic manuscript by Schwarze in the British Museum quite accidentally, and translated by him into Latin, after which text and Latin version were published by Petermann in the year 1853. In the text itself, the authorship of this book is ascribed to Philip the Apostle, whom Jesus bids to sit down and write the Revelation. It is genuine and ought to be as canonical as any other gospel. Unfortunately, it remains to this day untranslated. End of note. Compare. In Pistis Sophia, the disciple says to Jesus, Rabbi, reveal unto us the mysteries of the light, that is, the fire of knowledge or enlightenment. Forasmuch as we have heard thee saying that there is another baptism of smoke, and another baptism of the Spirit of holy light, that is, the Spirit of fire, I baptize you with water, but he shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost and with fire, says John of Jesus, in Matthew chapter 3, verse 2, meaning this esoterically. The real significance of this statement is very profound. It means that he, John, a non-initiated ascetic, can impart to his disciples no greater wisdom than the mysteries connected with the plane of matter, water being a symbol of it. His gnosis was that of exoteric and ritualistic dogma, of dead-letter orthodoxy, while the wisdom which Jesus, an initiate of the higher mysteries, would reveal to them was of a higher character, for it was the fire wisdom of the true gnosis, or the real spiritual enlightenment. Note, in the cycle of initiation, which was very long, water represented the first and lowest steps toward purification, while trials connected with fire came last. Water could regenerate the body of matter, fire alone that of the inner spiritual man. End of note. One was fire, the other the smoke. For Moses, the fire on Mount Sinai, and the spiritual wisdom imparted for the multitudes of the people below, for the profane, Mount Sinai in, through smoke, that is, the exoteric husks of orthodox or sectarian ritualism. Now, having the above in view, read the dialogue between the sages Narada and Devamata in the Anugita, the antiquity and importance of which manuscript, an episode from the Mahabharata, one can learn in the sacred books of the East, edited by Professor Max Müller. Narada is discussing upon the breaths, or the life winds, as they are called in the clumsy translation of such words as prana, apana, etc., whose full esoteric meaning and application to individual functions can hardly be rendered in English. He says of this science that it is the teaching of the Veda that the fire verily is all the deities, and knowledge of it arises among Brahmans, being accompanied by intelligence. By fire, says the commentator, he means the self. By intelligence, the occultist says, Narada means neither discussion nor argumentation, as Arjuna Mishra believes, but intelligence truly, or the adaptation of the fire of wisdom to exoteric ritualism for the profane. This is the chief concern of the Brahmans, who were the first to set the example to other nations, who thus anthropomorphized and carnalized the grandest metaphysical truths. Narada makes it plain and is made to say, "The smoke of that fire, which is of excellent glory, appears in the shape of darkness." Verily so. Its ashes are passion, and goodness is that in connection with it in which the offering is thrown. That is, that faculty in the disciple which apprehends the subtile truth, the flame, which escapes heavenward, while the objective sacrifice remains as a proof and evidence of piety only to the profane. For what can Narada mean in teaching that those who understand the sacrifice understand the samana and the vayana as the principal offering, and the prana and apana but portions of the offering, and between them is the fire? That is the excellent seat of the udana as understood by Brahmanas. As to that which is distinct from these pairs, hear me speak about that. Day and night are a pair, between them is the fire. That which exists and that which does not exist are a pair, between them is the fire, etc. And after every such contrast, Narada adds, that is the excellent seat of the udana as understood by Brahmanas. Now, many people do not know the full meaning of such terms as samana and vayana, prana and apana, explained as being life winds. We say principles and their respective faculties and senses. Being offered up to udana, the soi-disant principle, life wind, within brackets question mark, said to act at all the joints. Therefore the reader who is ignorant that the word fire means in these allegories both the self and the higher divine knowledge will understand nothing in this, and will therefore entirely miss the point of our argument, as its translators and even its editor, the great Oxford Sanskritist Max Müller, has missed the true meaning of Narada's words. Exoterically, all this enumeration of life winds means, of course, approximately that which is surmised in the footnotes, namely, the sense appears to be this: worldly life is due to the operations of the life winds which are attached to the self, and lead to its manifestations as individual souls, within brackets question mark. Of these, the samana and vayana are controlled and held under check by the prana and apana. The latter two are held in check and controlled by the udana, which thus controls all. And the control of this, which is the control of all five, leads to the Supreme Self. From page 259, Anugita, Sacred Books of the East, Volume 8. The above is given as an explanation of the text, which records the words of the Brahmana, who narrates how he reached the ultimate wisdom of yogism, and had reached all knowledge in this wise. Saying that he had perceived by means of the self the seat abiding in the self, where dwells the Brahman free from all, and explaining that that indestructible principle was entirely beyond the perception of senses, that is, of the five life winds, he adds that in the midst of all these life winds, which move about in the body and swallow up one another, blazes the Vaishvanara fire sevenfold. This fire, according to Nilakanta's commentary, is identical with the I, the self, which is the goal of the ascetic, Vaishvanara being a word often used for the self. Then the Brahmana goes on to enumerate that which is meant by the word sevenfold, and says, the nose or smell, the tongue, taste, the eye and the skin, and the ear as the fifth, the mind and the understanding, these are the 7 tongues of the blaze of Vaishvanara. Those are the 7 kinds of fuel for me. These are the 7 great officiating priests. These 7 priests are accepted by Arjuna Mishra in the sense of meaning the soul distinguished as so many souls are principles, with reference to these several powers. And finally, the translator seems to accept the explanation and reluctantly admits that they may mean this, though he himself takes the sense to mean the powers of hearing, etc., the physical senses in short, which are presided over by the several deities. But whatever it may mean, whether in scientific or orthodox interpretations, this passage on page 259 explains Narada's statements on page 276, and shows them referring to exoteric and esoteric methods and contrasting them. Thus the samana and the vyana, though subject to the prana and apana, and all the four to udana in the matter of acquiring the pranayama, or the hatha yogi chiefly, or the lower form of yoga, are yet referred to as the principal offering, for, as rightly argued by the commentator, their operations are more practically important for vitality, that is, they are the grossest, and are offered in the sacrifice to disappear, so to speak, in the quality of darkness, of that fire or its smoke, meaning mere exoteric ritualistic form. But prana and apana, though shown as subordinate, because less gross or more purified, have the fire between them, the self and the secret knowledge possessed by that self. So for the good and evil, and for that which exists and that which does not exist, all these pairs have fire between them, that is, esoteric knowledge, the wisdom of the divine self. Note, compare with these pairs of opposites in the Anugita, the pairs of aeons in the elaborate system of Valentinus, the most learned and profound master of Gnosis. As the pairs of opposites, male and female, are all derived from Akasha, undeveloped and developed, differentiated and undifferentiated, or self, or Prajapati, so are the Valentinian pairs of male and female aeons shown to emanate from Bethos, the pre-existing eternal depth, and in their secondary emanation from Ampsiuran, or sempiternal depths and silence, the second Logos. In the esoteric emanation there are 7 chief pairs of opposites, and so also in the Valentinian system there were 14, or twice 7. Epiphanius, copying incorrectly, copied 1 pair twice over. Mr. C.W. King thinks, and thus adds 1 pair to the proper 15. The Gnostics, etc., pages 263 to 264. Here King falls into the opposite error. The pairs of aeons are not 15, or blind, but 14, as the first aeon is that from which the others emanate, depth and silence being the first and only emanation from Bethos. As Hippolytus shows, the aeons of Valentinus are confessedly the 6 radicals of Simon, Magus, with the 7th, fire, at their head, and these are mind, intelligence, voice, name, reason, and thought, subordinate to fire, the higher self, or precisely the 7 winds, or the 7 priests of Anugita. End of note. Let those who are satisfied with the smoke of the fire remain wherein they are, that is to say, within the Egyptian darkness of theological fictions and dead-letter interpretations. The above is written only for the Western students of occultism and theosophy. The writer presumes to explain these things neither to the Hindus, who have their own gurus, nor to the Orientalists, who think they know more than all the gurus and rishis past and present put together. These rather lengthy quotations and examples cited are necessary, if even to point out to the student the works he has to study, so as to derive benefit and learning from comparison. Let him read Pishti's Sophia in the light of the Bhagavad Gita, the Anugita, and others, and then the statement made by Jesus in the Gnostic Gospel will become clear, and the dead-letter blinds disappear at once. Read this and compare with the explanation from the Hindu scriptures just given. Quote, and no name is more excellent than all these 7 vowels. A name wherein be contained all names, all lights, and all the 49 powers, knowing it. If a man quits this body of matter, no smoke, that is, no theological delusion, no darkness, no ruler of the sphere, no personal genius or planetary spirit called God, or of fate, karma, shall be able to hold back the soul that knoweth that name. If he shall utter that name unto the fire, the darkness shall flee away. And if he shall utter that name unto all their powers, nay, even unto Barbelo, the invisible God, and the triple-powered gods, so soon as he shall have uttered that name in those places, they shall all be shaken and thrown one upon the other, so that they shall be ready to melt, perish, and disappear, and shall cry aloud, O light of all lights that art in the boundless light, remember us also, and purify us. Notes. Note on if a man quits this body of matter, not necessarily at death only, but during samadhi or mystic trance. A note on no smoke, that is, no theological delusion. All the words and sentences between parenthetical marks are the writer's. This is translated directly from the Latin manuscripts of the British Museum. King's translation in the Gnostics conforms too much to the Gnosticism as explained by the Church Fathers. Note on Barbelo, the invisible God. Barbelo is one of the 3 invisible gods and, as C.W. King believes, includes the Divine Mother of the Savior, or rather Sophia Akamot. End of notes. It is easy to see who this light and name are, the light of initiation, and the name of the fire self, which is no name, no action, but a spiritual ever-living power, higher even than the invisible God, as this power is itself. But if the able and learned author of the Gnostics and their remains has not sufficiently allowed for the spirit of allegory and mysticism in the fragments translated and quoted by him in the above-named work, From Pistis Sophia, other Orientalists have done far worse. Having neither his intuitional perception of the Indian origin of the Gnostic wisdom still more than their gems, most of them, beginning with Wilson and ending with the dogmatic Weber, have made most extraordinary blunders with regard to almost every symbol. Sir M. Monier Williams and others show a very decided contempt for the, quote, esoteric Buddhists, unquote, as theosophists are now called. Yet no student of occult philosophy has ever mistaken a cycle for a living personage and vice versa, as were often the case with our learned Orientalists. An instance or two may illustrate the statement more graphically. Let us choose the best known. In the Ramayana, Garuda is called the material uncle of Sagara's 60,000 sons, and Ansumat, Sagara's grandson, the nephew of the 60,000 uncles, reduced to ashes by the look of Kapila, the Purushottama, or infinite spirit, who caused Sagara's horse for the Ashvamedha sacrifice to disappear. Again, Garuda's son, the Garuda being himself the Mahakalpa, or great cycle, Jatayu, the king of the feathered tribe, when on the point of being slain by Ravana, who carries off Sita, says, speaking of himself, "It is 60,000 years, O king, that I am born," after which, turning his back on the sun, he dies. Jatayu is, of course, the cycle of 60,000 years within the great cycle of Garuda, hence he is represented as his son, or nephew, ad libitum, since the whole meaning rests in his being placed on the line of Garuda's descendants. Note on Gadura's son. In other Puranas, Jatayu is the son of Aruna, Garuda's brother, both the sons of Kashyapa, but all this is external allegory. End of note. Then again there is Diti, the mother of the Maruts, whose descendants and progeny belonged to the posterity of Hiranyaksha, whose number was 77 crores, or 770 millions, of men. See Padma Purana. All such narratives are pronounced meaningless fictions and absurdities. But truth is the daughter of time, verily, and time will show. Meanwhile, what could be easier than an attempt, at least, to verify Puranic chronology? There are many Kapilas, but the Kapila who slew King Sagara's progeny, 60,000 men strong, was undeniably Kapila, the founder of the Sankhya philosophy, since it is so stated in the Puranas, although one of them flatly denies the imputation without explaining its esoteric meaning. It is the Bhagavata Purana 9, 8, 12, and 13, which says that the report that the sons of the king were reduced to ashes by the mere glance of the sage is not true, for, it argues, how can the quality of darkness, the product of anger, exist in a sage whose goodness was the essence that purified the world, the earth's dust, as it were, attributed to heavens? How should mental perturbation distract that sage, identified with the Supreme Spirit, and who has steered here on earth that solid vessel of the Sankhya philosophy, with the help of which he who desires to obtain liberation crosses the dreaded ocean of existence, that path to death? The Purana is in duty bound to speak as it does. It has a dogma to promulgate and a policy to carry out, that of great secrecy with regard to mystical, divine truths divulged for countless ages only at initiation. It is not in the Puranas, therefore, that we have to look for an explanation of the mystery connected with various transcendental states of being. That the story is an allegory is seen upon its very face. The 60,000 sons, brutal, vicious, and impious, are the personification of the human passions that a mere glance of the sage, the self, who represents the highest state of purity that can be reached on earth, reduces to ashes. But it has also other significations, cyclic and chronological meanings, a method of marking the periods when certain sages flourished, found also in other Puranas. Now it is as well ascertained as any tradition can be that it was at the Hardwar or Gangadwara, the door or gate of the Ganges, at the foot of the Himalayas, that Kapila sat in meditation for a number of years. Not far from the Sivalik range, the pass of Hardwar is called to this day Kapila's Pass, and the place Kapilashten by the ascetics. It is there that Ganges, emerging from its mountainous gorge, begins its course over the sultry plains of India, and it is as clearly ascertained by a geological survey that the tradition which claims that the ocean ages who washed the base of the Himalayas is not entirely without foundation, for there are traces left of this. The Sankhya philosophy may have been brought down and taught by the first, and written out by the last Kapila. Now Sagara is the name of the ocean and even of the Bay of Bengal at the mouth of the Ganges to this day in India. Vide Wilson's Vishnu Purana, Volume 3, page 309. Have geologists ever calculated the number of millenniums it has taken the sea to recede to where it is now, from Hardwar 1,024 feet above the level of the sea at present? If they did, those Orientalists who show Kapila flourishing from the 1st to the 9th century Anno Domini might change their opinions, if only for one of two very good reasons. The true number of years elapsed since Kapila's day is in the Puranas unmistakably, though the translators fail to see it. And secondly, the Kapila of the Satya and the Kapila of the Kali Yugas may be one and the same individuality, without being the same personality. Kapila, besides being the name of a personage of the once living sage and the author of Sankhya philosophy, is also the generic name of the Kumaras, the celestial ascetics and virgins. Therefore, the very fact of Bhagavata Purana calling that Kapila, which it showed just before, as a portion of Vishnu, the author of Sankhya philosophy, ought to have warned the reader of a blind containing an esoteric meaning. Whether the son of Vitata, as Harivansa shows him to be, or of anyone else, the author of Sankhya cannot be the same as the sage of the Satya Yuga at the very beginning of the Manvantara, when Vishnu is shown in the form of Kapila, imparting to all creatures true wisdom. For this relates to that primordial period when the sons of God taught to the just created men the arts and sciences which have been cultivated and preserved since then in the sanctuaries by the initiates. There are several well-known Kapilas in the Puranas. First the primeval sage, then Kapila, one of the secret three Kumaras, and Kapila, son of Kashyapa and Kadru, the many-headed serpent. See Vayu Purana placing him on the list of the 40 renowned sons of Kashyapa, besides Kapila, the great sage and philosopher of the Kali Yuga. Being an initiate, a serpent of wisdom, a Naga, the latter was purposely blended with the Kapilas of the former ages. Next section is section 24, the Cross and the Pythagorean Decade. The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Book 2, Part 2, The Archaic Symbolism of the World Religions. Section 24, The Cross and the Pythagorean Decade. The other Gnostics claimed that their science, the Gnosis, rested on the square, the angles of which represented, respectively, Sige, silence, Pithos, depth, Nous, spiritual soul or mind, and Aletheia, truth. It is they who were the first to introduce and reveal to the world that which had remained concealed for ages, namely the Tao, in the shape of a Procrustean bed, and Christos as incarnating in Christos, he who became for certain purposes a willing candidate for a series of tortures, mental and physical. For them the whole of the universe, metaphysical and material, was contained within, and could be expressed and described by the digits of number 10, the Pythagorean decade. This decade, representing the universe and its evolution out of silence and the unknown depths of the spiritual soul, or anima mundi, presented two sides or aspects to the student. It could be, and was at first, so used and applied to the macrocosm, after which it descended to the microcosm or man. There was, then, the purely intellectual and metaphysical, or the inner science, and the as purely materialistic, or surface science, both of which could be expounded by and contained in the decade. It could be studied, in short, from the universals of Plato and the inductive method of Aristotle. The former started from a divine comprehension when the plurality proceeded from unity, or the digits of the decade appeared, but to be finally reabsorbed, lost in the infinite circle. The latter depended on sensuous perception alone, when the decade could be regarded either as the unity that multiplies or matter which differentiates, its study being limited to the plane surface, to the cross, or the 7 which proceeds from the 10, or the perfect number, on earth as in heaven. This dual system was brought, together with the decade, by Pythagoras from India. That it was that of the Brahmans and Iranians, as they are called by the ancient Greek philosophers, is warranted to us by the whole range of Sanskrit literature, such as the Puranas and the laws of Manu. In these laws, or ordinances of Manu, it is said that Brahma first creates the 10 lords of being, the 10 Prajapati or creative forces, which 10 produce 7 other Manus, or rather, as some manuscripts have it, Munin instead of Manun, that is, devotees or holy beings, which are the 7 angels of the presence in the Western religion. This mysterious number 7, born from the upper triangle, the latter itself born from the apex thereof, or the silent depths of the unknown universal soul, Sige and Bitos, is the 7-fold Saptaparna plant, born and manifested on the surface of the soil of mystery, from the 3-fold root, buried deep under that impenetrable soil. This idea is fully elaborated in Volume 1, section Primordial Substance and Divine Thought, which the reader has to notice carefully if he would grasp the metaphysical idea involved in the above symbol. In man, as in nature, it is according to the Cis-Hamalian esoteric philosophy, which is that of the original Manu cosmogony, the septenary division that is intended by nature herself. The 7th principle, Purusha, alone is the divine self, strictly speaking, for, as said in Manu, he, Brahma, having pervaded the subtile parts of those 6 of unmeasured brightness, created or called them forth to self-consciousness, or the consciousness of that one self. Of these 6, 5 elements, or principles, or tattva, as Medatiti, the commentator, thinks, are called the atomic destructible elements, in verse 27. They are described in the above-named section, in 16, chapter 1, Manu. We have now to speak of the mystical language, that of the prehistoric races. It is not a phonetic, but a purely pictorial and symbolical tongue. It is known at present in its fullness to the very few, having become with the masses for more than 5,000 years an absolutely dead language. Yet most of the learned Gnostics, Greeks and Jews knew it and used it, though very differently. A few instances may be given. On the plane above, the number is no number but a naught, a circle. On the plane below, it becomes 1, which is an odd number. Each letter of the ancient alphabets having had its philosophical meaning and raison d'être, the number 1 signified with the Alexandrian initiates a body erect, a living, standing man, he being the only animal that has this privilege, and by adding to the 1 a head, it was transformed into a P, a symbol of paternity, of the creative potency, while R signified a moving man, one on his way. Hence, Pater Zeus had nothing sexual or phallic either in its sound or form of letters, nor had Pater Deus. Vide Ragon. If we turn now to the Hebrew alphabet, we shall find that while I, or Aleph, has a bull or an ox for its symbol, 10, the perfect number, or 1 of the Kabbalah, is a Yod, Y, I, or J, and means, as the first letter of Jehovah, the procreative organ, etc. The odd numbers are divine, and even numbers are terrestrial, devilish, and unlucky. The Pythagoreans hated the binary. With them it was the origin of differentiation, hence of contrasts, discord, or matter, the beginning of evil. In the Valentinian theogony, Bethos and Sige, depth, chaos, matter born in silence, are the primordial binary. With the early Pythagoreans, however, the duad was that imperfect state into which the first manifested being fell when it got detached from the monad. It was the point from which the two roads, the good and the evil, bifurcated. All that which was double-phased or false was called by them binary. One was alone good and harmony, because no disharmony can proceed from one alone. Hence the Latin word solus in relation to one and only God, the unknown of Paul. Solus, however, very soon became Sol, the sun. Reader's note, S-U-L. UN. End of reader's note. The turner is thus the first of the odd numbers, as the triangle is the first of the geometrical figures. This number is truly the number of mystery par excellence. To study it on the exoteric lines, one has to read Ragon's Cours interprétatif des initiations on the esoteric, the Hindu symbolism of numerals, as the combinations which were applied to it are numberless. It is on the occult properties of the three equal lines or sides of the triangle that Ragon based his studies and founded the famous Masonic Society of the Trinosophists, those who study three sciences, an improvement upon the ordinary three Masonic degrees given to those who study nothing except eating and drinking at the meetings of their lodges. The first line of the triangle offered to the apprentice for study, writes the founder, is the mineral kingdom, symbolized by a ship, shibboleth. In this kingdom begins the generation of the bodies. This is why the letter G is presented radiant before the eyes of the adept, within brackets, question mark, exclamation mark. The third side is left to the master mason, who has to complete his education by the study of the animal kingdom. It is symbolized by Meoben, son of a petrification, etc., etc. The first solid figure is the quaternary symbol of immortality. It is the pyramid, for the pyramid stands on a triangular, square, or polygonal base, and terminates with a point at the top, thus yielding the triad and the quaternary, or the 3 and 4. It is the Pythagoreans who taught the connection and relation between the gods and the numbers in a science called arithmemancy. The soul is a number, they said, which moves of itself and contains the number 4, and spiritual and physical man is number 3, as the turner represented for them not only the surface, but also the principle of the formation of the physical body. Thus animals were ternaries only, man alone being septenary, when virtuous. Quinary when bad, for number 5 was composed of a binary and a ternary, which binary threw everything in the perfect form into disorder and confusion. Note on the triangle. The reason for it is simple and was given in Isis Unveiled. In geometry, one line fails to represent a perfect body or figure, nor can two lines constitute a demonstratively perfect figure. The triangle alone is the first perfect figure. The perfect man, they said, was a quaternary and a ternary, of 4 material and 3 immaterial elements, which 3 spirits or elements we likewise find in 5 when it represents the microcosm. The latter is a compound of a binary directly relating to gross matter and of 3 spirits, since 5 is the ingenious union of 2 Greek accents placed over vowels which have or have not to be aspirated. The first sign is called strong spirit or superior spirit, the spirit of God aspired, spiritus, and breathed by man. The second sign, the lower, is the spirit of love, representing the secondary spirit. The third embraces the whole man. It is the universal quintessence, the vital fluid or life, from Ragon. The more mystic meaning of 5 is given in an excellent article by Mr. Sabarot in 5 Years of Theosophy, on pages 110 et sequens, in the 12 Signs of the Zodiac, in which he gives some rules that may help the inquirer to ferret out the deep significance of ancient Sanskrit nomenclature in the old Aryan myths and allegories. Meanwhile, let us see what has been hitherto stated about the constellation Capricornus in theosophical publications, and what is known of it generally. Everyone knows that Capricornus is the 10th sign of the zodiac, into which the sun enters at the winter solstice, about December 21st. But very few are those who know, even in India, unless they are initiated, the real mystic connection which seems to exist, as we are told, between the names Makara and Kumara. The first means some amphibious animal called flippantly crocodile, as some Orientalists think, and the second is the title of the great patrons of yogins. See Saiva Puranas, the sons of, and even one with, Rudra, Siva, a Kumara himself. It is through their connection with man that the Kumaras are likewise connected with the zodiac. Let us try to find out what the word Makara means. The word Makara, says the author of the 12 signs of the zodiac, contains within itself the clue to its correct interpretation. The letter Ma is equivalent to number 5, and Kara means hand. Now in Sanskrit, Tribhujam means a triangle, Bhujam or Karam, both synonyms being understood to mean a side. So Makaram or Panchakaram means a pentagon, the 5-pointed star or pentagon representing the 5 limbs of man. Note: what is the meaning and the reason of this figure? Because Manas is the 5th principle, and because the pentagon is the symbol of man, not only of the 5-limbed, but rather of the thinking, conscious man. End of note. Under the old system, we are told, Makara was the 8th instead of the 10th sign. Note: the reason for it becomes apparent when Egyptian symbology is studied. See further on. End of note. It is intended to represent the phases of the universe, and indicates that the universe is bounded by pentagons, as the Sanskrit writers speak also of Ashtadisa, or 8 phases bounding space, referring thus to the Lokapalas, the 8 points of the compass, the 4 cardinal and the 4 intermediate points. From an objective point of view, the microcosm is represented by the human body. Makaram may be taken to represent simultaneously both the microcosm and the macrocosm as external objects of perception, from pages 113 and 115. But in the true esoteric sense of the word, Makar does not mean crocodile, in truth at all, even when it is compared with the animal depicted on the Hindu zodiac, for it has the head and the forelegs of an antelope, and the body and the tail of a fish. Hence the 10th sign of the zodiac has been taken variously to mean a shark, a dolphin, etc., as it is the Vahan of Varuna, the ocean god, and is often called for this reason Jalarupa, or water form. The dolphin was the vehicle of Poseidon Neptune with the Greeks, and one with him esoterically. And this dolphin is the sea dragon as much as the crocodile of the sacred Nile is the vehicle of Horus, and Horus himself. I am the fish and seat of the great Horus of Kemur, says the mummy-form god with the crocodile's head, in chapter 88, verse 2 in the Book of the Dead. With the Paraternostics, it is Kozar, Neptune, who converts into a sphere the dodecagonal pyramid, and paints its gate with many colors. He has 5 androgyne ministers. He is Makara, the Leviathan. The rising sun being considered the soul of the gods sent to manifest itself to men every day, and the crocodile rising out of the water at the first sunbeam, that animal came finally to personify a solar fire devotee in India, as it personified that fire, or the highest soul, with the Egyptians. In the Puranas, the number of the Kumaras changes according to the exigencies of the allegory. For occult purposes, their number is given in one place as 7, then as 4, then as 5. In the Kurma Purana it is said of them, "These 5 Kumara, O Brahman, were yogins who acquired entire exemption from passion." Their very name shows their connection with the said constellation, the Makara, and with some other Puranic characters connected with the zodiacal signs. This is done in order to veil what was one of the most suggestive glyphs of the primitive temples. They are mixed up astronomically, physiologically, and mystically in general with a number of Puranic personages and events. hardly hinted at in the Vishnu, they figure in various dramas and events throughout all the other Puranas and sacred literature, so that the Orientalists, having to pick up the threads of connection hither and thither, have ended by proclaiming the Kumaras due chiefly to the fancy of the Puranic writers. But Ma, we are told by the author of the 12 signs of the zodiac, is 5, Kara, a hand with its 5 fingers, as also a 5-sided sign, or a pentagon. The Kumara, in this case an anagram for cult purposes, are 5 in esotericism. As yogis, because the last 2 names have ever been kept secret, they are the 5th order of Brahmadevas, and the 5-fold Kohans, having the soul of the 5 elements in them, water and ether predominating, and therefore their symbols were both aquatic and fiery. Wisdom lies concealed under the couch of him who rests on the golden lotus, Padma, floating on the water. In India it is Vishnu, one of whose avatars was Buddha, as claimed in days of old. The Prakritisas, the worshippers of Narayana, who, like Poseidon, moved or dwelt over, not under the waters, plunged into the depths of the ocean for their devotions and remained therein 10,000 years. And the Prakritisas are 10 exoterically, but 5 esoterically. Prakritas is in Sanskrit the name of Varuna, the water god, Nereus, an aspect of the same as Neptune, the Prakritisas being thus identical with the 5 ministers of Khazar, Poseidon, of the Paratei Gnostics. They are respectively called Ayot, Aioi, or Toav, the 5th a triple name, making 7, being lost, that is, kept secret. Note: so is Brahma's 5th head said to be lost, burnt to ashes by Siva's central eye, Siva being also Panakanana, 5-faced. Thus the number is preserved and secrecy maintained on the true esoteric meaning. End of note. This much for the aquatic symbol, the fiery connecting them with the fire symbol spiritually. For purposes of identity, let us remember that as mother of the Prakritisas was Savarna, the daughter of the ocean, so was Amphitrite, the mother of Neptune's mystic ministers. Now the reader is reminded that these 5 ministers are symbolized both in the dolphin, who had overcome the chaste Amphitrite's unwillingness to wed Poseidon, and in Triton, their son. The latter, whose body above the waist is that of a man and below a dolphin, a fish, is again most mysteriously connected with the oneness, the Babylonian dog, and further also with the fish avatar of Vishnu, Matsya, both teaching mortals wisdom. The dolphin, as every mythologist knows, was placed for this service by Poseidon among the constellations, and became with the Greeks Capricornus. The goat, whose hind part is that of a dolphin, thus shown identical with the Makara, whose head is also that of an antelope, and the body and tail those of a fish. This is why the sign of the Makara was born on the banner of Kamadeva, the Hindu god of love, identified in Atharva Veda with Agni, the fire god, the son of Lakshmi, as correctly given by Harivansa. For Lakshmi and Venus are one, and Amphitrite is the early form of Venus. Now Kama, the Makaraketu, is Aja, the unborn, and Atmabhu, the self-existent, and Aja is the Logos in the Rig Veda, as he is shown therein to be the first manifestation of the One. Desire first arose in it, which was the primal germ of mind, that which connects entity with non-entity, or Manas the 5th, with Atma the 7th esoterically, say the sages. This is the first stage. The second, on the following plane of manifestation, shows Brahma, whom we select as a representative for all the other first gods of the nations, as causing to issue from his body his mind-born sons, Sanandana and others, who in the 5th creation, and again in the 9th, for purposes of blind, become the Kumara. Let us close by reminding the reader that the goats were sacrificed to Amphitrite and the Nereids on the seashore, as goats are sacrificed to this day to Durga Kali, who is only the black side of Lakshmi, Venus, the white side of Shakti, and by suggesting what connection these animals may have with the Capricornus, in which appear 28 stars in the form of a goat, which goat was transformed by the Greeks into Amalthea, Jupiter's foster mother. Pan, the god of nature, had goat's feet and changed himself into a goat at the approach of Typhon. But this is a mystery which the writer dares not dwell upon at length, not being sure of being understood. Thus the mystical side of the interpretation must be left to the intuition of the student. Let us note one more thing in relation to the mysterious number 5. It symbolizes at one and the same time the spirit of life eternal and the spirit of life and love terrestrial in the human compound. And it includes divine and infernal magic and the universal and individual quintessence of being. Thus the 5 mystic words of vowels, vidinfa, uttered by Brahma at creation, which forthwith became the Pankadasa, certain Vedic hymns attributed to that god, are in their creative and magical potentiality the white side of the black tantric 5 makaras, or the 5 Ms. Makara, the constellation, is a seemingly meaningless and absurd name. Yet even besides its anagrammatical significance in conjunction with the term Kumara, the numerical value of its first syllable and its esoteric resolution into 5 has a very great and occult meaning in the mysteries of nature. Suffice it to say that as the sign of Makara is connected with the birth of the spiritual microcosm and the death or dissolution of the physical universe, its passage into the realm of the spiritual, so the Jyonkojans, called in India Kumara, are connected with both. Note: when the sun passes away behind the 30th degree of Makara and will reach no more the sign of the Menam, Pisces, then the night of Brahma has come. End of note. Moreover, in the exoteric religions, they have become the synonyms of the angels of darkness. Mara is the god of darkness, the fallen one, and death, and yet it is one of the names of Kama, the first god in the Vedas, the Logos, from whom have sprung the Kumaras, and this connects them still more with our fabulous Indian Makara and the crocodile-headed god in Egypt. Notes on death. Death of every physical thing truly, but Mara is also the unconscious quickener of the birth of the spiritual. A note on the crocodile-headed god in Egypt. Osiris is called in the Book of the Dead Osiris the double crocodile. See chapter on the names of Osiris, 142. He is the good and the bad principle, the day and the night sun, the god and the mortal man, thus far the macrocosm and the microcosm. End of note. The crocodiles in the celestial Nile are 5, and the god Tum, the primordial deity creating the heavenly bodies and the living beings, calls forth these crocodiles in his 5th creation. When Osiris, the defunct sun, is buried and enters into Amenti, the sacred crocodiles plunge into the abyss of the primordial waters, the great green one. When the sun of life rises, they re-emerge out of the sacred river. All this is highly symbolical, and shows how primeval esoteric truths found their expression in identical symbols. But as Mr. T. Sabaro truly declares, the veil that was dexterously thrown over certain portions of the mystery connected with the zodiacal signs by the ancient philosophers will never be fully lifted up for the amusement or edification of the uninitiated public. Nor was number 5 less sacred with the Greeks. The 5 words Pankadasa of Brahma have become with the Gnostics the 5 words written upon the Akashic, shining garment of Jesus at his glorification. The words Zama, Zama, Oza, Parama, Ozai, translated by the Orientalists, the robe, the glorious robe of my strength. These words were, in their turn, the anagrammatic blind of the 5 mystic powers represented on the robe of the, quote, resurrected, unquote, initiate after his last trial of 3 days trance, the 5 becoming 7 only after his so-called death, when the adept became the full Christos, the full Krishna Vishnu, that is, merged in nirvana. The E Delphicum, a sacred symbol, was the numeral 5 again, and how sacred it was is shown by the fact that the Corinthians, according to Plutarch, replaced the wooden numeral in the Delphic temple by a bronze one, and this one was transmuted by Livia Augusta into a facsimile of gold. It is easy to recognize in the 2 spirits the Greek accents, or signs, spoken of by Ragon vide supra, Atma and Buddhi, or divine spirit and its vehicle, spiritual soul. The 6, or the scenery, is dealt with later, while the septenary will be fully treated in the course of this volume, vide the mysteries of the Hebdomad. The Ogdoad, or 8, symbolizes the eternal and spiral motion of cycles, the 8, and the lying figure 8, and is symbolized in its turn by the caduceus. It shows the regular breathing of the cosmos presided over by the 8 great gods, the 7 from the primeval mother, the 1 and the triad. Then comes the number 9, or the triple ternary. It is the number which reproduces itself incessantly under all shapes and figures in every multiplication. It is the sign of every circumference, since its value in degrees is equal to 9, that is, to 3 plus 6 plus 0. It is a bad number under certain conditions, and very unlucky. If number 6 was the symbol of our globe ready to be animated by a divine spirit, 9 symbolized our earth informed by a bad or evil spirit. 10, or the decade, brings all these digits back to unity and ends the Pythagorean table. Hence this figure of a horizontal line, the 1 within a circle, unity within 0, was the symbol of deity, of the universe, and of man. Such is the secret meaning of the strong grip of the lion's paw of the tribe of Judah between 2 hands, the master mason's grip, the joint number of whose fingers is 10. If we now give our attention to the Egyptian cross, or the Tau, we may discover this latter so exalted by Egyptians, Greeks, and Jews to be mysteriously connected with the decade. The Tau is the Alpha and the Omega of secret divine wisdom, which is symbolized by the initial and the final letter of Tot, Hermes. Tot was the inventor of the Egyptian alphabet, and the letter Tau closed the alphabets of the Jews and the Samaritans, who called this character the end, or perfection, culmination, and security. Thence, Ragon tells us, the words terminus, end, and tectum, roof, are symbols of shelter and security, which is rather a prosaic definition. But such is the usual destiny of ideas and things in this world of spiritual decadence, if also of physical progress. Pan was at one time absolute nature, the one and great all, but when history catches a first glimpse of him, Pan has already tumbled down into a godling of the fields, a rural god, and history will not recognize him, while theology makes of him the devil. Yet his 7-piped flute, the emblem of the 7 forces of nature, of the 7 planets, the 7 musical notes, of all the septenary harmony, in short, shows well his primordial character. So with the cross. Far earlier than the Jews had devised their golden candlestick of the temple with 3 sockets on one side and 4 on the other, and made of number 7 a feminine number of generation, thus introducing the phallic element into religion. The more spiritually minded nations had made of the cross as 3, 4 equals 7, their most sacred divine symbol. Note, reflecting on the cross, the author of the Source of Measures shows that this candlestick in the temple was so composed that, counting on either side, there were 4 candle sockets, while at the apex, there being 1 in common to both sides, there were in fact 3 to be counted on the one side and 4 on the other, making in all number 7 upon the self-same idea of 1 in common with the cross display. Take a line of 1 unit in breadth by 3 units long, and place it on an incline. Take another of 4 units long, and lean it upon this one from an opposite incline, making the top unit of the 4 in length the corner or apex of a triangle. This is the display of the candlestick. Now take away the line of 3 units in length and cross it on the one of 4 units in length, and the cross form results. The same idea is conveyed in the 6 days of the week in Genesis, crowned by the 7, which was used by itself as base of circular measure. Unquote from page 51. End of note. In fact, circle, cross, and 7, the latter being made a base of circular measurement, are the first primordial symbols. Pythagoras, who brought his wisdom from India, left to posterity a glimpse into this truth. His school regarded number 7 as a compound of numbers 3 and 4, which they had explained in a dual manner. On the plane of the noumenal world, the triangle was, as the first conception of the manifested deity, its image, Father, Mother, Son, and the quaternary, the perfect number, was the noumenal ideal root of all numbers and things on the physical plane. Some students, in view of the sacredness of tetractys and the tetragrammaton, mistake the mystic meaning of the quaternary. The latter was with the ancients only a secondary perfection, so to speak, because it related only to the manifested planes, whereas it is the triangle, the Greek delta, a triangle, which was the vehicle of the unknown deity. A good proof of it lies with the name of the deity beginning with delta. Zeus was written Deus by the Boeotians, thence the Deus of the Latins. Note, see Little's Greek-English lexicon. End of note. This in relation to the metaphysical conception with regard to the meaning of the septenary in the phenomenal world, but for purposes of profane or exoteric interpretation, the symbolism changed. 3 became the ideograph of the 3 material elements, air, water, earth, and 4 became the principle of all that which is neither corporeal nor perceptible. But this has never been accepted by the real Pythagoreans. Viewed as a compound of 6 and 1, the scenery and the unity, number 7 was the invisible center, the spirit of everything. See further the explanation of 6. As there exists no body with 6 lines constituting its form without a 7th being found as the central point in it. See crystals and snowflakes in so-called inanimate nature. Moreover, number 7, they said, has all the perfection of the unit, the number of numbers. For as absolute unity is uncreated and impartite, hence numberless, and no number can produce it, so is the 7. No digit contained within the decade can beget or produce it, and it is 4 which affords an arithmetical division between unity and 7, as it surpasses the former by the same number, 3, as it is itself surpassed by the 7, since 4 is by as many numbers above 1 as 7 is above 4. This from a manuscript supposed to be by Saint-Germain. With the Egyptians, number 7 was the symbol of life eternal, says Ragon, and adds that this is why the Greek letter Z, which is but a double 7 in the initial letter of Zau, I live, and of Zeus, the father of all living. Moreover, figure 6 was the symbol of the earth during the autumn and winter sleeping months, and figure 7 during spring and summer, as the spirit of life animated her at that time, the seventh or central informing force. We find the same in the Egyptian mythos and symbol of Osiris and Isis, personifying fire and water metaphysically, and the sun and the Nile physically. The number of the solar year, 365 in days, is the numerical value of the word Nalos, Nile. This, together with the bull, with the crescent and the ansated cross between its horns, and the earth under its astronomical symbol, the cross over a circle, are the most phallic symbols of later antiquity. The Nile was the river of time with the number of a year, or year and a day, 364 plus 1 equals 365. It represented the parturient water of Isis, or Mother Earth, the moon, the woman, and the cow, also the workshop of Osiris, representing the Tzod Olaum of the Hebrews. The ancient name of this river was Eridanus, or Hebrew Yardan, with the Coptic or Old Greek suffix. This was the door of the Hebrew word Jared, or source, or descent, of the river Jordan, which had the same mythical use with the Hebrews that the Nile had with the Egyptians. It was the source of descent and held the waters of life. From an unpublished manuscript. Note: it had no such meaning in the beginnings, nor during the earlier dynasties. End of note. It was, to put it plainly, the symbol of the personified earth, or Isis, regarded as the womb of that earth. This is shown clearly enough, and Jordan, the river so sacred now to Christians, held no more sublime or poetical meaning in it than the parturient waters of the moon, Isis or Jehovah in his female aspect. Now, as shown by the same scholar, Osiris was the sun and the river Nile and the tropical year of 365 days, while Isis was the moon, the bed of that river, or the Mother Earth, for the parturient energies of which water was a necessity, as also the lunar year of 354 days, the time maker of the periods of gestation. All this, then, is sexual and phallic, and our modern scholars seem to find in these symbols nothing beyond a physiological or phallic meaning. Nevertheless, the three figures 365, or the number of days in a solar year, have but to be read with the Pythagorean key to find in them a highly philosophical and moral meaning. One instance will be sufficient. It can read the earth 3, animated by 6, the spirit of life 5, simply because 3 is equivalent to the Greek gamma, which letter is the symbol of Gaia, the earth, while the figure 6 is the symbol of the animating or informing principle, and the 5 is the universal quintessence which spreads in every direction and forms all matter. From Saint-Germain's manuscript. The few instances and examples brought forward reveal only one small portion of the methods used to read the symbolical ideographs and numerals of antiquity. The system being of an extreme and complex difficulty, very few, even among the initiates, could master all the 7 keys. Is it to be wondered, then, that the metaphysical gradually dwindled down into the physical nature, that the sun, once upon a time the symbol of deity, became, as aeons glided by, that of its creative ardor only, and that thence it fell into a glyph of phallic significance? But surely it is not those whose method was, like Plato's, to proceed from the universals down to the particulars, who could ever have begun by symbolizing their religions by sexual emblems. It is quite true, though uttered by that incarnated paradox, Eliphas Levi, that man is God on earth, and God is man in heaven. But this could not, and never did apply to the one deity, only to the hosts of its incarnated beings, called by us Diancochans, by the ancients gods are now transformed by the Church into devils on the left and into the Saviour on the right side. But all such dogma grew out of the one root, the root of wisdom, which grows and thrives on the Indian soil. There is not an archangel that could not be traced back to its prototype in the sacred land of Aryavarta. These prototypes are all connected with the Kumaras who appear on the scene of action by refusing, as Sanat Kumara and Sananda, to create progeny. Yet they are called the creators of thinking man. More than once they are brought into connection with Narada, another bundle of apparent incongruities, yet a wealth of philosophical tenets. Narada is the leader of the Gandharvas, the celestial singers and musicians. Esoterically, the reason for it is explained by the fact that the latter, the Gandharvas, are the instructors of men in the secret sciences. It is they who, loving the women of the earth, disclosed to them the mysteries of creation, or, as in the Veda, the heavenly Gandharva is a deity who knew and revealed the secrets of heaven and divine truths in general. If we remember what is said of this class of angels in Enoch and in the Bible, then the allegory is plain. Their leader, Narada, while refusing to procreate, leads men to become gods. Moreover, all of these, as stated in the Vedas, are Chandaya, will-born, or incarnated in different manvantaras of their own will, and they are shown in exoteric literature as existing age after age, some being cursed to be reborn, others incarnating as a duty. Finally, as the Sanakadikas, the 7 Kumaras who went to visit Vishnu on the White Island, Svetadvipa, the island inhabited by the Mahayogins, they are connected with Sakadvipa and the Lemurians and Atlanteans of the 3rd and 4th races. In esoteric philosophy, the Rudras, Kumaras, Adityas, Gandharvas, Asuras, etc., are the highest Dhyankohans or Devas as regards intellectuality. They are those who, owing to their having acquired by self-development the 5-fold nature, hence the sacredness of number 5, became independent of the pure Arupa Devas. This is a mystery very difficult to realize and understand correctly, for we see that those who were obedient to law are, equally with the rebels, doomed to be reborn in every age. Narada, the Rishi, is cursed by Brahma to incessant peripateticism on earth, that is, to be constantly reborn. He is a rebel against Brahma, and yet has no worse fate than the Jayas, the 12 great creative gods produced by Brahma as his assistants in the functions of creation. For the latter, lost in meditation, only forgot to create, and for this they are equally cursed by Brahma to be born in every manvantara, and still they are termed, together with the rebels, Chandayas, or those born of their own will in human form. All this is very puzzling to one who is unable to read and understand the Puranas except in their dead-letter sense. Note: yet this sense, if once mastered, will turn out to be the secure casket which holds the keys to the secret wisdom. True, a casket so profusely ornamented that its fancy work hides and conceals entirely any spring for opening it, and thus makes the unintellectual believe it has not and cannot have any opening in it. Still the keys are there, deeply buried, yet ever present to him who searches for them. End of note. Hence we find the Orientalist refusing to be puzzled, and cutting the Gordian knot of perplexity by declaring the whole scheme figments of a Brahminical fancy and love of exaggeration. But to the student of occultism, the whole is pregnant with deeply philosophical meaning. We willingly leave the rind to the Western Sanskritists, but claim the essence of the fruit for ourselves. We do more. We concede that in one sense much in these so-called fables refers to astronomical allegories about constellations, asterisms, stars, and planets. Yet, while the Gandharva of the Rig Veda may there be made to personify the fire of the sun, the Gandharva Devas are entities both of a physical and psychic character, while the Apsarases, with other Rudras, are both qualities and quantities. In short, if ever unravelled, the theogony of the Vedic gods will reveal fathomless mysteries of creation and being. Truly, says Parasara, these 33 divinities exist age after age, and their appearance and disappearance is in the same manner as the sun sets and rises again. From Book 1, Chapter 15. There was a time when the Eastern symbol of the cross and circle, the swastika, was universally adopted. With the esoteric, and for the matter of that, exoteric, Buddhist and Chinaman and the Mongolian, it means the 10,000 truths. These truths, they say, belong to the mysteries of the unseen universe and primordial cosmogony and theogony. Since four had crossed the circle like two lines of flame, horizontally and vertically, the hosts of the blessed ones have never failed to send their representatives upon the planets they are made to watch over from the beginning. This is why the swastika is always placed, as the ansated cross was in Egypt, on the breasts of the defunct mystics. It is found on the heart of the images and statues of Buddha in Tibet and Mongolia. It is the seal placed also on the hearts of the living initiates, burnt into their flesh forever with some. This because they have to keep those truths inviolate and intact, in eternal silence and secrecy, to the day these are perceived and read by their chosen successors, new initiates, worthy of being entrusted with the 10,000 perfections. So degraded, however, has it now become, that it is often placed on the headgear of the quote, gods, unquote, the hideous idols of the sacrilegious boons, the Dugpas, sorcerers, of the Tibetan borderlands, until found out by Galukpa and torn off together with the head of the quote, god, unquote, though it would be better were it that of the worshipper was severed from the sinful body. Still, it can never lose its mysterious properties. Throw a retrospective glance, and see it used alike by the initiates and seers as by the priests of Troy, found by Schliemann on the site of that old city. One finds it with the old Peruvians, the Assyrians, Chaldeans, as well as on the walls of the old world Cyclopean buildings, in the catacombs of the New World, and in those of the old, within brackets, question mark, at Rome, where, because the first Christians are supposed to have concealed themselves and their religion, it is called crux dissimulata. According to De Rossi, the swastika from an early period was a favorite form of the cross, employed with an occult signification, which shows the secret was not that of the Christian cross. One swastika cross in the catacombs is the sign of an inscription which reads, Zotico, zotikn, vitalis vitala, or life of life. Note, quoted in the Natural Genesis on page 427 of Volume 1, end of note. But the best evidence to the antiquity of the cross is that which is brought forward by the author of Natural Genesis on page 433. The value of the cross, says Mr. Massey, as a Christian symbol, is supposed to date from the time when Jesus Christ was crucified. And yet, in the Christian iconography of the catacombs, no figure of a man appears upon the cross during the first 6 or 7 centuries. They are all forms of the cross, except that, the alleged starting point of the new religion, that was not the initial but the final form of the crucifix. Note, with the Christians most undeniably, with the pre-Christian symbologists it was, as said, the bed or couch of torture during the initiation mystery, the crucifix being placed horizontally on the ground and not erect, as at the time when it became the Roman gallows. End of note. During some 6 centuries after the Christian era, the foundation of the Christian religion in a crucified Redeemer is entirely absent from Christian art. The earliest known form of the human figure on the cross is the crucifix presented by Pope Gregory the Great to Queen Theodolinde of Lombardy, now in the Church of St. John at Monza, whilst no image of the crucified is found in the catacombs at Rome earlier than that of San Giulio, belonging to the 7th or 8th century. There is no Christ and no crucified. The cross in the Christ, even as the Staurus cross, was a type and a name of Horus, the Gnostic Christ. The cross, not the crucified, is the essential object of representation in its art and of adoration in its religion. The germ of the whole growth and development can be traced to the cross, and that cross is pre-Christian, is pagan and heathen in half a dozen different shapes. The cult began with the cross, and Julian was right in saying he waged a warfare with the X, which he obviously considered had been adopted by the agnostics and mytholators to convey an impossible significance. Note: so it was, and could not be otherwise. Julian the Emperor was an initiate, and as such knew well the mystery meaning, both metaphysical and physical. End of note. During centuries the cross stood for the Christ, and was addressed as if it were a living being. It was made divine at first, and humanized at last. Unquote by Mr. Massey. Few world symbols are more pregnant with real occult meaning than the swastika. It is symbolized by the figure 6, for, like that figure, it points in its concrete imagery, as the ideograph of the number does, to the zenith, and the nadir to north, south, west, and east. One finds the unit everywhere, and that unit reflected in all and every unit. It is the emblem of the activity of Forhat, of the continual revolution of the wheels, and of the 4 elements, the sacred 4 in their mystical, not alone in their cosmical meaning. Further, its 4 arms, bent at right angles, are intimately related, as shown elsewhere, to the Pythagorean and Hermetic scales. One initiated into the mysteries of the meaning of the swastika, say the commentaries, can trace on it with mathematical precision the evolution of cosmos and the whole period of Sandhya. Also the relation of the seen to the unseen, and the first procreation of man and species. To the Eastern occultist, the tree of knowledge in the paradise of man's own heart becomes the tree of life eternal, and has naught to do with man's animal senses. It is an absolute mystery that reveals itself only through the efforts of the imprisoned manas and the ego to liberate themselves from the thraldom of sensuous perception and see in the light of the one eternal present reality. To the Western Kabbalist, and now far more to the superficial symbologist, nursed in the lethal atmosphere of materialistic science, there is but one chief explanation of the mysteries of the cross: its sexual element. Even the otherwise spiritualistic modern commentator discerns in the cross and swastika this feature before all others. The cross was used in Egypt as a protecting talisman and a symbol of saving power. Typhon, or Satan, is actually found chained and bound to the cross. In the ritual, the Osirian cries, the Apophis is overthrown. Their cords bind the south, north, east, and west. Their cords are on him. Haruba has knotted him. Note: Apophis, or Apap, is the serpent of evil, symbol of human passions. The sun, Osiris Horus, destroys him when Apap is thrown down, bound and chained. The god Akar, the chief of the gate of the abyss of Akar, the realm of the sun, of chapter 15, verse 39, binds him. Apophis is the enemy of Ra, light. But the great Apap has fallen, exclaims the defunct. The scorpion has hurt thy mouth, he says to the conquered enemy. in chapter 39, verse 7. The scorpion is the worm that never dies of the Christians. Apophis is bound on the Tau or Tut, the emblem of stability. See the erection of Tut in Tattoo, Ritual 18. End of note. These were the cause of the 4 quarters or the cross. Thor is said to smite the head of the serpent with his hammer, a form of swastika or 4-footed cross. In the primitive sepulchres of Egypt, the model of the chamber had the form of a cross. Note. So have the crypts in the Cis-Himalayan regions where initiates live, and where their ashes are placed for 7 lunar years. End of note. The pagoda of Mathura, the birthplace of Krishna, was built in the form of a cross. Note. See the Natural Genesis, Volume 1, page 432. End of note. This is perfect, and no one can discern in this sexual worship, with which the Orientalists love to break the head of paganism. But how about the Jews, and the exoteric religions of some Hindu sects, especially the rites of the Vallabhacharyas? The Lingam and Yoni of Shiva worship stand too high philosophically, its modern degeneration notwithstanding, to be called simple phallic worship. But the tree or cross worship of the Jews, as denounced by their own prophets, can hardly escape the charge. Note, the cross and the tree are identical and synonymous in symbolism. End of note. The sons of sorcerers, the seed of the adulterer, as Isaiah calls them, in 62, never lost an opportunity of inflaming themselves with idols under every green tree, which denotes no metaphysical recreation. It is from these monotheistic Jews that the Christian nations have derived their religion, their God of gods, the one living God, while despising and deriding the worship of the deity of the ancient philosophers. Let such believe in and worship the physical form of the cross by all means, but to the follower of the true Eastern archaic wisdom, to him who worships in spirit naught outside the absolute unity, that ever-pulsating great heart that beats throughout, as in every atom of nature, each such atom contains the germ from which he may raise the tree of knowledge, whose fruits give life and eternal and not physical life alone. For him the cross and circle, the tree or the Tau, after every symbol relating to these has been applied to and read one after another, still a profound mystery in their past, and it is to that past alone that he directs his eager gaze. He cares little whether it be the seed from which grows the genealogical tree of being called the universe. Nor is it the 3-in-1, the triple aspect of the seed, its form, color, and substance, that interest him, but rather the force which directs its growth, the ever mysterious as the ever unknown. For this vital force that makes the seed germinate, burst open and throw out shoots, then form the trunk and branches, which, in their turn, bend down like the boughs of the Ashwata, the holy tree of Bodhi, throw their seed out, take root, and procreate other trees. This is the only force that has reality for him, as it is the never-dying breath of life. The pagan philosopher sought for the cause. The modern is content with only the effects, and seeks the former in the latter. What is beyond he does not know, nor does the modern agnostic care, thus rejecting the only knowledge upon which he can with full security base his science. Yet this manifested force has an answer for him who seeks to fathom it. He who sees in the cross the desiccated circle of Plato, the pagan, not the antitype of circumcision, as Christian St. Augustine did, is forthwith regarded by the Church as a heathen, by science as a lunatic. This because, while refusing to worship the god of physical generation, he confesses that he can know nothing of the cause which underlies the so-called first cause, the causeless cause of this vital cause. tacitly admitting the all-presence of the boundless circle and making of it the universal postulate upon which the whole of the manifested universe is based, the sage keeps a reverential silence concerning that upon which no mortal men should dare to speculate. The Logos of God is the revealer of man, and the Logos, the verb, of man is the revealer of God, says Eliphas Levi in one of his paradoxes. To this the Eastern occultist would reply, on this condition, however, that man should be dumb on the cause that produced both God and its Logos. Otherwise he becomes invariably the reviler, not the revealer, of the incognizable deity. We have now to approach a mystery, the hebdomad in nature. Perchance all that we may say will be attributed to coincidence. We may be told that this number in nature is quite natural, and so we say too, and has no more significance than the illusion of motion which forms the so-called strobic circles. No great importance was given to these singular illusions when Professor Sylvanus Thompson exhibited them at the meeting of the British Association in 1877. Nevertheless, we should like to learn the scientific explanation why 7 should ever form itself as a preeminent number, 6 concentric circles around a 7th, and 7 rings within one another round a central point, etc., etc., in this illusion produced by a swaying saucer or any other vessel. We give the solution refused by science in the section which follows. And the section which follows is section 25, The Mysteries of the Hebdomad. The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Book 2, Part 2, The Archaic Symbolism of the World Religions. Section 25, The Mysteries of the Hebdomad. We must not close this part on the symbolism of archaic history without an attempt to explain the perpetual recurrence of this truly mystic number in every scripture known to the Orientalists. As every religion, from the oldest to the latest, claims its presence and explains it on its own grounds agreeably with its own special dogmas, this is no easy task. We can, therefore, do no better or more explanatory work than to give a bird's-eye view of all. The sacred numbers 3, 4, 7 are the sacred numbers of light, life, and union, especially in this present Manvantara, our life cycle, of which number 7 is the special representative, or the factor number. This has now to be demonstrated. If one happened to ask a Brahmin learned in the Upanishads, so full of the secret wisdom of old, why he of whom 7 forefathers have drunk the juice of the moon plant is Trisuparna, as Bhopaveda is credited with saying, and why the Somapa Pitris should be worshipped by the Brahmin Trisuparna, very few could answer the question. Or if they knew, they would still less satisfy one's curiosity. Let us then hold to what the old esoteric doctrine teaches. Quote, when the first 7 appeared on earth, they threw the seed of everything that grows on the land into the soil. First came 3, and 4 were added to these as soon as a stone was transformed into plant. Then came the second 7, who, guiding the jivas of the planets, produced the middle, intermediate natures between plant and moving living animal. The third 7 evolved their chayas. The fifth 7 imprisoned their essence. Thus man became a saptaparna. Unquote from the commentary. Subsection A. Saptaparna. Such is the name given in occult phraseology to man. It means, as shown elsewhere, a 7-leaved plant, and the name has a great significance in the Buddhist legends. So it had also under disguise in the Greek, quote, myths, unquote. The T, or tau, formed from the figure 7, and the Greek letter gamma was, in C section cross and circle, the symbol of life, and of life eternal, of earthly life, because gamma is the symbol of the earth, Gaia, and of life eternal, because the figure 7 is the symbol of the same life linked with divine life, the double glyph expressed in geometrical figures being a triangle and a quaternary, the symbol of a septenary man. Note on Gaia, hence the initiates in Greece called the Tau Gainius, son of Gaia, sprung from earth, like Tityos in Odyssey 7:324. End of note. This following diagram will perhaps assist the student to grasp these parallelisms. The human principles. 7th principle is Atma. 6th, Buddhi. 5th, Manas. All these are contained within the upper triangle. The 4th principle, Kamarupa, the principle of animal desire, which burns fiercely during life in matter, resulting in satiety. It is inseparable from animal existence. It is denoted with hydrogen, and in principles of physical nature, this is the lightest of all gases. It burns in oxygen, giving off the most intense heat of any substance in combustion, and forming water, the most stable of compounds. Hydrogen enters largely into all organic compounds. The 3rd human principle, Linga Sharira, connected with nitrogen, the inert vehicle or form on which the body is molded, the vehicle of life. It is dissipated very shortly after the disintegration of the body. In physical nature, it is an inert gas, the vehicle with which oxygen is mixed to adapt the latter for animal respiration. It also enters largely into all organic substances. The 2nd human principle is prana, life, the active power producing all vital phenomena. This is connected with oxygen. In physical nature, it's the support of combustion, the life-giving gas, the active chemical agent in all organic life. The 1st human principle is the gross matter of the body, the substance formed and molded over the linga sharira, chaya, by the action of prana. This is connected with carbon. In physical nature, it is the fuel par excellence, the basis of all organic substances, the chemical element of which forms the largest variety of compounds. Now we are taught that all these earliest forms of organic life also appear in septenary groups of numbers. From minerals the soft stones that hardened, stanza, followed by the hard plants of the softened, which are the product of the mineral, for it is from the bosom of the stone that vegetation is born. From Commentary, Book 9:19. And then to man, all the primitive models in every kingdom of nature begin by being ethereal, transparent films. This, of course, takes place only in the first beginning of life. With the next period, they consolidate, and at the 7th begin to branch off into species, all except man, the first of the mammalian animals in the 4th round. Note, protista are not animals. The reader is asked to bear in mind that when we speak of animals, the mammalians alone are meant. Crustacea, fishes, and reptiles are contemporary with, and most have preceded physical man in this round. All were bisexual, however, before the age of mammalia in the closing portion of the 2nd or Mesozoic ages, yet nearer to the Paleozoic than the Cainozoic ages. Smaller marsupial mammalia are contemporary with the huge reptilian monsters of the secondary. End of note. Virgil, versed as every ancient poet was, more or less, in esoteric philosophy, sang evolution in the following strains. Principiu caelum ac terras, camposque liquentes, lucemque globum lunae, titaniaque astra. Spiritus intus alit, totamque infusa per artus, mens agitat molem et magnus e corpore miscet, inde hominum pecudumque genus, etc., from Aeneid 6. Note, quote, First divine spirit within sustains the heaven, the earth and watery plains, the moon's orb and shining stars, and the eternal mind diffused through all the parts of nature, actuates the whole stupendous frame and mingles with the vast body of the universe. Thence proceed the race of men and beasts, the vital principles of the flying kind, and the monsters which the ocean breeds under its smooth crystal plain. All proceeds from ether and from its 7 natures, said the alchemists. Science knows these only in their superficial effects. End of note. First came 3, or the triangle. This expression has a profound meaning in occultism, and the fact is corroborated in mineralogy, botany, and even in geology, as was demonstrated in the section on ancient chronology by the compound number 7, the 3 and the 4 being in it. Salt in solution proves it, for when its molecules, clustering together, begin to deposit themselves as a solid, the first shape they assume is that of triangles, of small pyramids and cones. It is the figure of fire, whence the word pyramids, while the second geometrical figure in manifested nature is a square or a cube. 4 and 6, for the particles of earth being cubical, those of fire are pyramidal, truly. From Enfield. The pyramidal shape is that assumed by the pines, the most primitive tree after the fern period. Thus the 2 opposites in cosmic nature, fire and water, heat and cold, begin their metrographical manifestations, one by a trimetric, the other by a hexagonal system. For the stellate crystals of snow viewed under a microscope are all and each of them a double or treble 6-pointed star with a central nucleus, like a miniature star within the larger one. Says Mr. Darwin in his Descent of Man on page 164, showing that the inhabitants of the seashore are greatly affected by the tides. Quote, the most ancient progenitors in the kingdom of the vertebrata apparently consisted of a group of marine animals living either about the mean high water mark or about the mean low water mark, pass through a complete cycle of tidal changes in a fortnight. Now it is a mysterious fact that in the higher and now terrestrial vertebrata, many normal and abnormal processes have 1 or more weeks, septenates, as their periods, such as gestation of mammals, the duration of fevers, etc. The eggs of the pigeon are hatched in 2 weeks, or 14 days, those of the fowl in 3, those of the duck in 4, those of the goose in 5, and those of the ostrich in 7, quote from Bartlett's Land and Water. This number is closely connected with the moon, whose occult influence is ever manifesting itself in septenary periods. It is the moon which is the guide of the occult side of terrestrial nature, while the sun is the regulator and factor of manifested life. See also Volume 1, Part 2. And this truth was ever evident to the seers and the adepts. Jacob Boehme, by insisting on the fundamental doctrine of the 7 properties of everlasting Mother Nature, proved himself thereby a great occultist. But to return to the consideration of the septenary in ancient religious symbolism, to the metrological key or to the symbolism of the Hebrews, which reveals numerically the geometrical relations of the circle, all deity, to the square, cube, triangle, and all the integral emanations of the divine area, may be added the theogonic key. This key explains that Noah, the deluge patriarch, is in one aspect the permutation of the deity, the universal creative law, for the purpose of the formation of our earth, its population, and the propagation of life on it in general. Now, bearing in mind the septenary division in divine hierarchies, as in cosmic and human constitutions, the student will readily understand that Jah Noah is at the head of and is the synthesis of the lower cosmic quaternary. The upper sephirothal, the triangle, triad, of which Jehovah Bina, intelligence, is the left, female, angle, emanates the square, quaternary. The latter symbolizing by itself the heavenly man, the sexless Adam Kadmon, viewed as nature in the abstract, becomes a septonate again by emanating from itself the additional three principles, the lower terrestrial or manifested physical nature, matter, and our earth, the seventh being Malkut, the bride of the heavenly man, thus forming, with the high triad or Kether, the crown, the full number of the sephirothal tree, the 10, the total in unity or the universe. Apart from the high triad, the lower creative Sephiroth are 7. The above is not directly to our point, though it is a necessary reminder to facilitate the comprehension of what follows. The question at issue is to show that Jah Noah, or the Jehovah of the Hebrew Bible, the alleged creator of our earth, of man and all upon it, is A. the lowest septenary, the creative Elohim in his cosmic aspect. B. the Tetragrammaton, or the Adam Kadmon, the heavenly man of the 4 letters in his theogonic and Kabbalistic aspects. C. Noah, identical with the Hindu Sishta, the human seed, left for the peopling of the earth from a previous creation or Manvantara, as expressed in the Puranas, or the pre-Diluvian period, as rendered allegorically in the Bible, in his cosmic character. But whether a quaternary tetragrammaton or a triad, the Bible creative God is not the universal 10 unless blended with Ein Sof, as Brahma with Parabrahm, but a septenary, one of the many septenaries of the universal septonate. In the explanation of the question now in hand, his position and status as Noah may best be shown by placing the 3, triangle, and 4, square, on parallel lines with the cosmic and human principles. For the latter, the old familiar classification is made use of. Thus, the human aspects of principles versus the cosmic aspects or principles. The human aspects of principles: 1. Universal spirit, Atma. 2. Spiritual soul, Buddhi. 3. Human soul, mind, Manas. 4. Animal soul, Kamarupa. 5. Astral body, Linga Sharira. 6. Life essence, Prana. 7. Body, Stula Sharira. The cosmic aspects of principles: 1. The unmanifested Logos. 2. Universal latent ideation. 3. Universal or cosmic active intelligence. 4. Cosmic chaotic energy. 5. Astral ideation reflecting terrestrial things. 6. Life essence or energy. 7. The earth. As an additional demonstration of the statement, let the reader turn to scientific works. Ararat, the Mount of Descent. Hor Jared. Hatto mentions it out of composition by Aret. Editor of Moses Charensis says, by this, they say, is signified the first place of descent of the ark. Ryan's Annals, Volume 4, pages 5, 6, and 15. Cosmic aspects, notes. 2. Universal latent ideation. The Advaita Vedantic philosophy classifies this as the highest trinity, or rather the trinitarian aspect of Chinmatra, Parabrahman, explained by them as the bare potentiality of prajna, the power or the capacity that gives rise to perception, Chidakasam, the infinite field or plane of universal consciousness, and asat mula prakriti, or undifferentiated matter. See personal and impersonal God in 5 years of theosophy. 3. Universal cosmic active intelligence. Note: differentiated matter existing in the solar system, that does not touch the whole cosmos, in 7 different conditions, and prajna, or the capacity of perception, existing likewise in 7 different aspects corresponding to the 7 conditions of matter. There must necessarily be 7 states of consciousness in man, and according to the greater or smaller development of these states, the system of religions and philosophies were schemed out. End of note. Under Berg, mountain, Noxus of Ararat. Ararat for Arath, earth, Aramaic reduplication. Here it is seen that Nok and Hatu make use of the same equivalent in Arath, with the meaning of earth. Note: in Source of Measures, page 65, the author explains, note that in Hebrew, Jared, the father of Enoch, is construed to be the mount of descent, and it is said to be the same with Ararat, on which the cubical structure of Noah, or foundation measure, rested, Jared. The root derivations are the same with those of Ararat, of acre, of earth. As by Hebrew metrology, Jared is literally in British YRD. Hence in Jared is to be found literally our English word yard, and also Yah or Jehovah is rod. It is noteworthy that the son of Jared, meaning Enoch, lived 365 years, and it is said of him by rabbinical commentators that the year period of 365 days was discovered by him, thus bringing again time and distance values together, that is, year time descended by coordination, through the Yod or Yared, who thus was its father in or through Enoch, and truly enough, 1296 equals yard or Yared by 4 equals 5184. The characteristic value of the solar day in thirds, which, as stated, may be styled the parent numerically of the solar year, from the same source, page 65. This, however, by the astronomical and numerical Kabbalistic methods. Esoterically, Jared is the 3rd race and Enoch the 4th. But as he is taken away alive, he symbolizes also the elect saved in the 4th, while Noah is the 5th from the beginning, the family saved from waters, eternally and physically. End of note. On spirit of the earth, Jehovah, note, represented as the jealous, angry, turbulent, and ever-active God, revengeful, and kind only to his chosen people when propitiated by them. End of note. Mount Ararat, note. Noah and his 3 sons are the collective symbol of this quaternary in many and various applications, Han being the chaotic principle. End of note. Noah thus symbolizing both the root Manu and the seed Manu, or the power which developed the planetary chain and our Earth, and the seed race, the 5th, which was saved, where the last sub-races of the 4th perished, Vaivashvata Manu. The number 7 will be seen to recur at every step. It is he, Noah, who represents, as Jehovah's permutation, the septenary host of the Elohim, and is thus the father or creator, the preserver of all animal life. Hence verses 2 and 3 of chapter 7 of Genesis, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7s, the male 3 and the female 4, of fowls also of the air by 7s, etc., etc., followed by all the 7ing of days and the rest. Subsection B. The tetractys in relation to the heptagon. Thus number 7, as a compound of 3 and 4, is the factor element in every ancient religion, because it is the factor element in nature. Its adoption must be justified, and it must be shown to be the number par excellence. For since the appearance of the book Esoteric Buddhism, frequent objections have been made and doubts expressed as to the correctness of these assertions. And here let the student be told at once that in all such numerical divisions the one universal principle, although referred to as the one, because the only one, never enters into the calculations. It stands in its character of the absolute, the infinite, and the universal abstraction entirely by itself and independent of every other power, whether noumenal or phenomenal. It is neither matter nor spirit. It is neither ego nor non-ego, and it is neither object nor subject, says the author of Personal and Impersonal God, and adds, quote, in the language of Hindu philosophers, it is the original and eternal combination of Purusha, spirit, and Prakriti, matter. As the Advaitis hold that an external object is merely the product of our mental states, Prakriti is nothing more than an illusion, and Purusha is the only reality. It is the one existence which remains in the universe of ideas. This, then, is the Parabrahm of the Advaitis. Even if there were to be a personal God, with anything like a material upadhi, physical basis of whatever form, from the standpoint of an Advaiti, there will be as much reason to doubt his noumenal existence as there would be in the case of any other object. In their opinion, a conscious God cannot be the origin of the universe, as his ego would be the effect of a previous cause, if the word conscious conveys but its ordinary meaning. They cannot admit that the grand total of all the states of consciousness in the universe is their deity, as these states are constantly changing, and as a cosmic ideation ceases during pralaya. There is only one permanent condition in the universe, which is the state of perfect unconsciousness, bare chirakasam, the field of consciousness, in fact. When my readers once realize the fact that this grand universe is in reality but a huge aggregation of various states of consciousness, they will not be surprised to find that the ultimate state of unconsciousness is considered as Parabrahman by the Advaitis. Note, see 5 Years of Theosophy, article Personal and Impersonal God. End of note. Being itself entirely out of human reckoning or calculation, yet this huge aggregation of various states of consciousness is a septenate, in its totality entirely composed of septenary groups, simply because the capacity of perception exists in 7 different aspects corresponding to the 7 conditions of matter from the same source, or the 7 properties, or states, or conditions of matter. And therefore, number 1 down to number 7 begins in the esoteric calculations with the first manifested principle, which is number 1 if we commence from the above, and the 7th when reckoning from below, or from the lowest principle. The tetrad is esteemed in the Kabbalah, as it was by Pythagoras, the most perfect or rather sacred number, because it emanated from the One, the first manifested unit, or rather the 3 in 1. Yet the latter has been ever impersonal, sexless, incomprehensible, though within the possibility of the higher mental perceptions. The first manifestation of the eternal monad was never meant to stand as the symbol of another symbol, the unborn for the element-born, or the one logos for the heavenly man. Tetragrammaton, or the tetractys of the Greeks, is the second logos, the demiurgos. The tetrad, as Thomas Taylor thought, vide the Pythagorean triangle, is the animal self of Plato, who, as Syrianus justly observes, was the best of the Pythagoreans. It subsists at the extremity of the intelligible triad, as is most satisfactorily shown by Proclus in the 3rd book of his treatise on the Theogony of Plato. And between these 2 triads, the double triangle, the one intelligible and the other intellectual, another order of gods exists which partakes of both extremes. The Pythagorean world, Plutarch tells us, consisted of a double quaternary. This statement corroborates what is said about the choice by the exoteric theologies of the lower tetractys, 4, the quaternary of the intellectual world, the world of Mahat, is Tagaton, nous, psyche, hyle, highly, while that of the sensible world of matter, which is properly what Pythagoras meant by the word cosmos, is fire, air, water, and earth. The 4 elements are called by the name of rhizomata or rhizomata, the roots or principles of all mixed bodies. That is, the lower tetractys is the root of illusion of the world of matter, and this is the tetragrammaton of the Jews, and the mysterious deity over which the modern Kabbalists make such a fuss. Thus number 4 forms the arithmetical mean between the monad and the heptad, as this contains all powers, both of the productive and produced numbers. For this of all numbers under 10 is made of a certain number. The duad doubled makes a tetrad, and the tetradoubled or unfolded makes the hebdomad, the septenary. 2 multiplied into itself produces 4, and retorted into itself makes the first cube. This first cube is a fertile number, the ground of multitude and variety, constituted of 2 and 4, depending on the monad, the 7th. Thus, the 2 principles of temporal things, the pyramis and cube, form and matter, flow from one fountain, the tetragon on earth, the monad in heaven." Unquote. See Reuchlin, Kabbalah 1, Chapter 2. Here Reuchlin, the great authority on the Kabbalah, shows the cube to be matter, whereas the pyramid or the triad is form. With the Hermetians, the number 4 becomes the symbol of truth only when amplified into a cube, which unfolded makes 7, as symbolizing the male and female elements and the elements of life. Note: in the Hebrew-Egyptian mystery, The Source of Measures, the author shows on page 50 that the figure of the cube unfolded in connection with the circle becomes a cross proper, or the tau form, and the attachment of the circle to this last gives the ansated cross of the Egyptians. While there are but 6 faces to a cube, the representation of the cross as the cube unfolded, as to the crossbars, displays one face of the cube as common to 2 bars, counted as belonging to either. That is, once counted horizontally and once vertically. 4 for the upright and 3 for the crossbar, making 7 in all. Adding, here we have the famous 4 and 3 and 7. Esoteric philosophy explains that 4 is the symbol of the universe in its potential state, or chaotic matter, and that it requires spirit to permeate it actively. That is, the primordial abstract triangle has to quit its one-dimensional quality and spread across that matter, thus forming a manifested basis on the 3-dimensional space, in order that the universe should manifest intelligibly. This is achieved by the cube unfolded, hence the ansated cross as the symbol of man, generation, and life. In Egypt, Ankh signified soul, life, and blood. It is the ensouled living man, the septenary. End of note. Some students have been puzzled to account for the vertical line, which is male becoming in the cross a 4-partitioned line, 4 being a female number, while the horizontal, the line of matter, becomes 3-divisioned. But this is easy of explanation. Since the middle face of the cube unfolded is common to both the vertical and the horizontal bar, or double line, it becomes neutral ground, so to say, and belongs to neither. The spirit line remains triadic, and the matter line twofold, 2 being an even and therefore a female number also. Moreover, according to Theon, the Pythagoreans who gave the name of harmony to the tetractys, because it is a diatessaron in sesquitertia, were of opinion that the division of the canon of monochord was made by the tetractys in the duad, triad, and tetrad, for it comprehends a sesquitertia, a sesquialtra, a double, a triple, and a quadruple portion, the section of which is 27. In the ancient musical notation, the tetrachord consisted of 3 degrees or intervals, and 4 terms of sounds called by the Greeks diatesaron, and by us a 4th. Moreover, the quaternary, though an even, therefore a female, infernal number, varied according to its form. This is shown by Stanley in Pythagoras, page 61. The 4 was called by the Pythagoreans the key-keeper of nature, but in union with the 3, which made it 7, it became the most perfect and harmonious number, nature herself. The 4 was the masculine of feminine form when forming the cross, and 7 is the master of the moon, for this planet is forced to alter her appearance every 7 days. It is on number 7 that Pythagoras composed his doctrine on the harmony and music of the spheres, calling a tone the distance of the moon from the earth, from the moon to Mercury half a tone, from thence to Venus the same, from Venus to the Sun 1½ tones, from the Sun to Mars a tone, from thence to Jupiter half a tone, from Jupiter to Saturn half a tone, and thence to the zodiac a tone, thus making 7 tones, the diapason, harmony. All the melody of nature is in those 7 tones, and therefore is called the voice of nature. Plutarch explains that the Achaean Greeks regarded the tetrad as the root and principle of all things, since it was the number of the elements which gave birth to all visible and invisible created things. With the brothers of the rosy cross, the figure of the cross, or cube unfolded, formed the subject of a disquisition in one of the theosophic degrees of Purée, and was treated according to the fundamental principles of light and darkness, or good and evil. Writes Reuchlin, quote, "The intelligible world proceeds out of the divine mind, or unit, after this manner. The tetractys reflecting upon its own essence, the first unit, productrix of all things, and on its own beginning, saith thus, once 1, twice 2, immediately ariseth a tetrad, having on its top the highest unit, and becomes a pyramis, whose base is a plain tetrad answerable to a superficies, upon which the radiant light of the divine unity produceth the form of incorporeal fire, by reason of the descent of Juno, matter, to inferior things. Hence ariseth essential light, not burning, but illuminating. This is the creation of the middle world, which the Hebrews call the supreme, the world of their deity. It is termed Olympus, entirely light, and replete with separate forms, where it is the seat of the immortal gods, Deum Domus Alta, whose top is unity, its wall trinity, and its superficies quaternity. Unquote from Reuchlin, Kabbalah, page 689. The superficies has thus to remain a meaningless surface if left by itself, unity only illuminating a quaternity. The famous lower 4 has to build for itself also a wall from trinity, if it would be manifested. Moreover, the tetragrammaton, or microprosopus, is Jehovah, arrogating to himself very improperly the was, is, will be, now translated into the I am that I am, and interpreted as referring to the highest abstract deity, while esoterically and in plain truth it means only periodically chaotic, turbulent, and eternal matter with all its potentialities. for the Tetragrammaton is one with nature or Isis, and is the exoteric series of androgyne gods such as Osiris Isis, Jove Juno, Brahmavak, or the Kabbalistic Jehovah, all male-females. Every anthropomorphic god in old nations, as Marcellinus Vicinus well observed, has his name written with 4 letters. Thus with the Egyptians he was Teut, the Arabs Allah, the Persians Sire, the Magi Orosi, the Mahometans Abdi, the Greeks Theos, the ancient Turks Esar, the Latins Deus, to which J. Lorenzo Anina adds the German Gott, the Sarmatian Buu, etc., etc. The monad being 1, an odd number, the ancients therefore called the odd the only perfect numbers, and selfishly perhaps, yet as a fact, considered them all masculine and perfect, applicable to the celestial gods, while even numbers such as 2, 4, 6, and especially 8 as being female were regarded as imperfect, and given only to the terrestrial and infernal deities. In his 8th Ecloge, Virgil records the fact by saying, Numero Deus impare gaudet, unequal numbers please the gods. But number 7, the heptagon, the Pythagoreans considered to be a religious and perfect number. It was called telesphoros, because by it all the universe and mankind is led to its end, that is, its culmination. Being under the rule of 7 sacred planets, the doctrine of the spheres shows, from Lemuria to Pythagoras, the 7 powers of terrestrial and sublunary nature, as well as the 7 great forces of the universe, proceeding and evolving in 7 tones, which are the 7 notes of the musical scale. Note on being under the rule of 7 sacred planets. The 7 planets are not limited to this number because the ancients knew of no others, but simply because they were the primitive or primordial houses of the 7 logoi. There may be 9 or 99 other planets discovered. This does not alter the fact of these 7 alone being sacred. End of note. The heptad, our septenary, was regarded as the number of a virgin, because it is as unborn, like the Logos or the Aja of the Vedantins, without a father or a mother, but proceeding directly from the monad, which is the origin and crown of all things. Pythagorean Triangle, page 174. And if the heptad is made to proceed from the monad directly, then it is, as taught in the secret doctrine of the oldest schools, the perfect and sacred number of this Mahamanvantara of ours. The septenary, or heptad, was sacred indeed to several gods and goddesses. To Mars, with his 7 attendants, to Osiris, whose body was divided into 7 and twice 7 parts, to Apollo the sun, between his 7 planets, and playing the hymn to the 7-rayed on his 7-stringed harp, to Minerva, the fatherless and the motherless, and others. Cis-Himalayan occultism with its 7ing, and because of such 7ing must be regarded as the most ancient, the original of all. It is opposed by some fragments left by the Neoplatonists, and the admirers of the latter, who hardly understand what they defend, say to us, See, your forerunners believed only in a triple man composed of a spirit, soul, and body. Behold, the Taraka Raya Yoga of India limits that division to 3, we to 4, and the Vedantins to 5 koshas, they say. To this, we of the archaic school asks, why then does the Greek poet say that it is not 4 but 7 who sing the praise of the spiritual sun? He says, 7 sounding letters sing the praise of me, the immortal God, the almighty deity. Why again is the triune Yao, the mystery of God, called the fourfold, and yet the triad and tetradic symbols come under one unified name with the Christians, the Jehovah of the 7 letters? Why again in the Hebrew Sheba is the oath, the Pythagorean tetractys, identical with number 7, or as Mr. Gerald Massey has it, taken on oath was synonymous with 27, and the 10 expressed by the letter Yod, which was the full number of Yahweh-Sabaoth, the 10-lettered God. In Lucian's auction, Pythagoras asks, "How do you reckon?" The reply is 1, 2, 3, 4. "Then do you see," says Pythagoras, "in what you conceive 4 there are 10. Then a perfect triangle and our art, tetractys, 4 or 7. Why does Proclus say in Timaeus, the father of the golden verses celebrates the tetractys as the fountain of perennial nature? Simply because those Western Kabbalists who quote the exoteric proofs against us have no idea of the real esoteric meaning, because all the ancient cosmologies, the oldest cosmographies of the two most ancient people of the fifth root race, the Hindu-Aryans and the Egyptians, adding to them the early Chinese races, the remnants of the fourth or Atlantean race, based the whole of their mysteries on number 10, the higher triangle standing for the invisible and metaphysical world, the lower 3 and 4, or the septennate, for the physical realm. It is not the Jewish Bible that brought number 7 into prominence. Hesiod used the words, "The seventh is the sacred day," before the Sabbath of, quote, "Moses," unquote, was ever heard of. The use of number 7 was never confined to any one nation. This is well testified by the 7 vases in the Temple of the Sun, near the ruins of Babylon in Upper Egypt. The 7 fires burning continually for ages before the altars of Mithra, the 7 holy fanes of the Arabians, the 7 peninsulas, the 7 islands, 7 seas, mountains, and rivers of India, and of the Zohar. See Ibn Gibril. The Jewish Sephiroth of the 7 splendors, the 7 Gothic deities, the 7 worlds of the Chaldeans and their 7 spirits, the 7 constellations mentioned by Hesiod and Homer, and all the interminable sevens which the Orientalists find in every manuscript they discover. What we have to say finally is this. Enough has been brought forward to show why the human principles were and are divided in the esoteric schools into 7. Make it 4, and it will either leave man minus his lower terrestrial elements, or, if viewed from a physical standpoint, make of him a soulless animal. The quaternary must be the higher or the lower, the celestial or terrestrial tetractys, to become comprehensible according to the teachings of the esoteric ancient school. Man must be regarded as a septenary. This was so well understood that even the so-called Christian Gnostics had adopted this time-honored system. Read a section on the 7 souls. This remained for a long time secret, as, though suspected, no manuscripts of that time spoke of it clearly enough to satisfy the skeptic. But there comes to our rescue the literary curiosity of our age, the oldest and best preserved gospel of the Gnostics, Pistis Sophia. To make the proof absolutely complete, we shall quote from an authority, C.W. King, the only archaeologist who had a faint glimmer of this elaborate doctrine, and the best writer of the day on the Gnostics and their gems. According to this extraordinary piece of religious literature, a true Gnostic fossil, the human entity, is a septenary ray from the One, just as our school teaches. Note: the 7 centers of energy evolved or rendered objective by the action of Fohat upon the one element, or in fact the 7th principle of the 7 elements which exist throughout manifested cosmos. We may here point out that they are in truth the Sephiroth of the Kabbalists, the 7 gifts of the Holy Ghost in the Christian system, and in a mystical sense, the 7 children or sons of Devaki killed before the birth of Krishna by Kamsa. Our 7 principles symbolize all of these. We have to part or separate from them before we reach the Krishna or Christ state, that of a Jivan Mukta, and center ourselves entirely in the highest, the 7th or the One. End of note. It is composed of 7 elements, 4 of which are borrowed from the 4 Kabbalistical manifested worlds. Thus, from Asia it gets the nephesh, or seat of the physical appetites, vital breath also. From Desira, the Ruach, or seat of the passions, within brackets, question mark, exclamation mark. From Bria, the Neshama, and from Aziluth it obtains the Chaya, or principle of spiritual life, from King. This looks like an adaptation of the Platonic theory of the soul's obtaining its respective faculties from the planets in its downward progress through their spheres. But the Pistis Sophia, with its accustomed boldness, puts this theory into a much more poetical shape. The inner man is similarly made up of 4 constituents, but these are supplied by the rebellious aeons of the spheres, being the power, a particle of the divine light, divine particula ore, yet left in themselves. The soul, the 5th, formed out of the tears of their eyes and the sweat of their torments, the agrimimon preumpatos, counterfeit of the spirit, seemingly answering to our conscience, the 6th, and lastly the moira, fate, karmic ego, whose business it is to lead the man to the end appointed for him. If he hath to die by the fire, to lead him into the fire. If he hath to die by a wild beast, to lead him unto the wild beasts, etc. The 7th. Notes. Note on Moira, fate. Moira is destiny, not fate in this case, as it is an appellation, not a proper noun. See Wolf's translation in Odyssey 22, 413. But Moira, the goddess of fate, is a deity who, like Ira, gives to all their portion of good and evil, and is therefore karma, vide little. By this abbreviation, however, the subject to destiny or karma is meant, the self or ego, and that which is reborn. Nor is anguditimon, nor is antimimon preumpatos our conscience, but our buddhi, nor is it again the counterfeit of spirit, but modelled after, or a counterpart of the spirit, which buddhi is as the vehicle of Atma. End of note. Subsection C. The septenary element in the Vedas. It corroborates the occult teaching concerning the 7 globes and the 7 races. We have to go to the very source of historical information if we would bring our best evidence to testify to the facts enunciated. For, though entirely allegorical, the Rig Vedic hymns are nonetheless suggestive. The 7 rays of Surya, the sun, are made therein parallel to the 7 worlds of every planetary chain, to the 7 rivers of heaven and earth, the former being the 7 creative hosts, and the latter the 7 men, or primitive human groups. The 7 ancient rishis, the progenitors of all that lives and breathes on earth, are the 7 friends of Agni, his 7 horses or 7 heads. The human race has sprung from fire and water, it is allegorically stated, fashioned by the fathers or the ancestor sacrifices from Agni. For Agni, the Ashwins, the Adityas, are all synonymous with that sacrificer, or the fathers variously called Pitar, Pitris, fathers, Angirases, the Sadyas, divine sacrifices, the most occult of all. They are called Devaputra Rishaya, or the sons of God. Note, Professor Roth in Peter's lexicon defines the Agni-races as an intermediate race of higher beings between gods and men, while Professor Weber, according to his invariable custom of modernizing and anthropomorphizing the divine, sees in them the original priests of the religion which was common to the Aryan Hindus and Persians. Roth is right. Angirases was one of the names of the Dhyanis, or Devas instructors, Gurudeva, of the late 3rd, the 4th, and even of the 5th race initiates. End of note. The sacrifices, moreover, are collectively the one sacrificer, the father of the gods, Vishvakarman, who performed the great Sarvameda ceremony and ended by sacrificing himself. See Rig Vedic hymns. In these hymns the heavenly man is called Purusha, the man, from whom Viraj was born, and from Viraj the mortal man. It is Varuna, now drawn from his sublime position to be the chief of the lords Dhyanis or Devas, who regulates all natural phenomena, who makes a path for the sun for him to follow. The 7 rivers of the sky, the descending creative gods, and the 7 rivers of the earth, the 7 primitive mankinds, are under his control, as will be seen. For he who breaks Varuna's laws, Vratani, causes of natural action, active laws, is punished by Indra, the Vedic powerful god, whose Vrata, law or power, is greater than the Vratani of any other god. Thus Rig Veda, the oldest of all the known ancient records, may be shown to corroborate the occult teachings in almost every respect. Its hymns, the records written by the earliest initiates of the 5th, our race, concerning the primordial teachings, speak of the 7 races, 2 still to come, allegorizing them by the 7 streams, and of the 5 races, Panka Kristaya, which have already inhabited this world, on the 5 regions, Panka Pradika, as also of the 3 continents that were. Note: 3 submerged or otherwise destroyed continents, the first continent of the first race prevailing to the last and existing to this day, are described in the occult doctrine: the Hyperborean, the Lemurian, adopting the name now known in science, and the Atlantean. Most of Asia issued from under the waters after the destruction of Atlantis. Africa came still later, while Europe is the 5th and the latest, portions of the 2 Americas being far older. But of these more anon. The initiates who recorded the Vedas, or the rishis of our 5th race, wrote at a time when Atlantis had already gone down. Atlantis is the 4th continent that appeared, but the 3rd that disappeared. End of note. It is those scholars only who will master the secret meaning of the Purusha Sukta, in which the intuition of the modern Orientalist has chosen to see one of the very latest hymns of the Rig Veda, who may hope to understand how harmonious are its teachings and how corroborative of the esoteric doctrines. One must study in all the abstruseness of their metaphysical meaning the relations in it between the heavenly man, Purusha, sacrificed for the production of the universe and all in it, see Vishvakarman, and the terrestrial mortal man, before one realizes the hidden philosophy of this verse. Quote 15. He, man, Purusha or Vishvakarman, had 7 enclosing logs of fuel and thrice 7 layers of fuel. When the gods performed the sacrifice, they bound the man as victim. Unquote. And this relates to the 3 septenary primeval races, and shows the antiquity of the Vedas, who knew of no other, probably in this earliest oral teachings, and also to the 7 primeval groups of mankind, as Vishvakarman represents divine humanity collectively. Note: nor is this archaic teaching so very unscientific, since one of the greatest naturalists of the age, the late Professor Agassiz, admitted the multiplicity of the geographical origins of man, and supported it to the end of his life. The unity of the human species was accepted by the illustrious professor of Cambridge, USA, in the same way as the occultists do, namely in the sense of their essential and original homogeneity, and their origin from one and the same source. For example, Negroes, Aryans, Mongols, etc., have all originated in the same way and from the same ancestors. The latter were all of one essence, yet differentiated because belonging to 7 planes which differed in degree, though not in kind. That original physical difference was but little more accentuated by that of geographical and climatic conditions later on. This is not the theory of Agassiz, of course, but the esoteric version. It is fully discussed in the addenda in Part 3. End of note. The same doctrine is found reflected in other old religions. It may and must have come down to us disfigured and misinterpreted, as in the case of the Parsis, who read it in their Vendidad and elsewhere without understanding the allusions they contain any better than the Orientalists do. Yet the doctrine is plainly mentioned in their old works. See the enumeration of the 7 spheres, not the Karshvara of the earth as believed in Fargod 19:30. But see further on. Comparing the esoteric teaching with the interpretations by James Darmster, the Vendidad, edited by Professor Max Müller, one may see at a glance where the mistake is made and the cause that produced it. The passage runs thus, quote, "The Indo-Iranian Ahura was often conceived as sevenfold by the play of certain mythical (formulae and the strength of certain mythical numbers. The ancestors of the Indo-Iranians had been led to speak of 7 worlds, and the supreme god was often made sevenfold, as well as the worlds over which he ruled." Note: the 7 worlds are, as said, the 7 spheres of the chain, each presided over by one of the 7 great gods of every religion. When the latter became degraded and anthropomorphized, and the metaphysical ideas nearly forgotten, the synthesis, or the highest, the 7th, was separated from the rest, and that personification became the 8th god, whom monotheism tried to unify, but failed. In no exoteric religion is God really one, if analyzed metaphysically. End of note. Quote, "The 7 worlds became in Persia the 7 Karshvara of the earth. The earth is divided into 7 Karshvara, only one of which is known and accessible to man, the one on which we live, namely Hwanirata, which amounts to saying that there are 7 earths." Note: the 6 invisible globes of our chain are both worlds and earths, as is our own, albeit invisible. But where could be the 6 invisible earths on this globe? End of note. Parsi mythology knows also of 7 heavens. Hwanirata itself is divided into 7 climes, and the same division and doctrine is to be found in the oldest and most revered of the Hindu scriptures, the Rig Veda. Mention is made therein of 6 worlds besides our earth, the 6 Rajamsi above Prithivi, the earth, or this, Idam, as opposed to that which is yonder, that is, the 6 globes on the 3 other planes or worlds. See Rig Veda. The italics are ours to point out the identity of the tenets with those of the esoteric doctrine and the mistake made. The Magi or Mazdaeans only believed in what other people believed in, namely in 7 worlds or globes of our planetary chain, of which only one is accessible to man at the present time, our Earth, and in the successive appearance and destruction of 7 continents or earths on this our globe, each continent being divided in commemoration of the 7 globes, 1 visible, 6 invisible, into 7 islands or continents, 7 climes, etc., etc. This was a common belief in those days when the now secret doctrine was open to all. It is this multiplicity of localities under septenary division that made the Orientalists, led astray moreover by the oblivion of both the uninitiated Hindus and Parsis of their primitive doctrines, feel so puzzled by this ever-recurring 7-fold number as to regard it as mythical. It is that oblivion of the first principles which has led the Orientalists off the right track and made them commit the greatest blunders. The same failure is found in the definition of the gods. Those who are ignorant of the esoteric doctrine of the earliest Aryans can never assimilate or understand correctly the metaphysical meaning contained in these beings. Ahura Mazda, or Majd, was the head and synthesis of the 7 Ameshaspentas, or Amshaspens, and therefore an Ameshaspenta himself. just as Jehovah Bina Arelim was the head and synthesis of the Elohim and no more, so Agni Vishnu Surya was the synthesis and head, or the focus whence emanated in physics and in metaphysics from the spiritual as from the physical sun, the 7 rays, the 7 fiery tongues, the 7 planets or gods. All these became supreme gods and the one God, but only after the loss of the primeval secrets, the sinking of Atlantis, or the quote, flood, unquote, and the occupation of India by the Brahmans, who sought safety on the summits of the Himalayas, when even the high tablelands of what is now Tibet became submerged for a time. Ahura Mazda is addressed only as the most blissful spirit, creator of the corporeal world, in the Vendidad. Ahura Mazda in its literal translation means the wise Lord. Ahura, Lord, and Mazda, wise. Moreover, this name of Ahura, in Sanskrit Asura, connects him with the Manasa Putras, the sons of wisdom who informed the mindless man and endowed him with his mind, Manas. Ahura, Asura, may be derived from the root ah, to be, but in its primal signification it is what the secret teaching shows it to be. When geology shall have found out how many thousands of years ago the disturbed waters of the Indian Ocean reached the highest plateau of Central Asia, when the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf made one with it, then only will they know the age of the Aryan Brahmanical nation, and the time of its descent into the plains of Hindustan, which it did millenniums later. Yima, the so-called first man in the Vendidad, as much as his twin brother Yama, the son of Vaivashvata Manu, belongs to 2 epochs of universal history. He is the progenitor of the second human race, hence the personification of the shadows of the Pitris, and the father of the post-diluvian humanity. The Magi said Yima as we say man when speaking of mankind. The fair Yima, the first mortal who converses with Ahura Mazda, is the first man who dies or disappears, not the first who is born. The son of Viksangat was like the son of Vaivashvata, the symbolical man, who stood in esotericism as the representative of the first 3 races and the collective progenitor thereof. Of these races the first 2 never died, but only vanished, absorbed in their progeny, and the third knew death only towards its close, after the separation of the sexes and its fall into generation. Note: death came only after man had become a physical creature, vide super. The men of the first race and also the second dissolved and disappeared in their progeny. End of note. This is plainly alluded to in the second far-god of the Vendidad. Yima refuses to become the bearer of the law of Ahura Mazda, saying, I was not born, I was not taught to be the preacher and the bearer of thy law. And then Ahura Mazda asks him to make his men increase and watch over his world. 3 and 4. He refuses to become the priest of Ahura Mazda, because he is his own priest and sacrificer. But he accepts the second proposal. He is made to answer, quote, Yes, I will rule and watch over thy world. There shall be, while I am king, neither cold wind nor hot wind, neither disease nor death, unquote. Then Ahura Mazda brings him a golden ring and a poniard, the emblems of sovereignty, and under the sway of Yima, quote, 300 winters passed away, and the earth was replenished with flocks and herds, with men and dogs and birds, and with red blazing fires, etc. And 300 winters mean 300 periods or cycles. replenished, mark well, that is to say, all this had been on it before, and thus is proven the knowledge of the doctrine about the successive destructions of the world and its life cycles. Once the 300 winters were over, Ahura Mazda warns Yima that the earth is becoming too full, and men have nowhere to live. Then Yima steps forward, and with the help of the Spenta Aromaita, the female genius or spirit of the earth, makes that earth stretch out and become larger by 1/3, after which new herds and flocks of men appear upon it. Ahura Mazda warns him again, and Yima makes the earth by the same magic power to become larger by 2/3. 900 winters pass away, and Yima has to perform the ceremony for the 3rd time. The whole of this is allegorical. The 3 processes of stretching the earth refer to the 3 successive continents and races issuing one after and from the other, as explained more fully elsewhere. After the 3rd time, Ahura Mazda warns Yima in an assembly of celestial gods and excellent mortals that upon the material world the fatal winters are going to fall, and all life will perish. This is the old Mazdaean symbolism for the, quote, flood, unquote, and the coming cataclysm to Atlantis, which sweeps away every race in its turn. Like Vaivashvata Manu and Noah, Yima makes a vara, an enclosure, an ark, under the god's direction, and brings thither the seed of every living creature, animals, and fires. It is of this, quote, earth, unquote, or new continent, that Zarathustra became the lawgiver and ruler. This was the 4th race in its beginning, after the men of the 3rd began to die out. Till then, as said, there had been no regular death, but only a transformation, for men had no personality as yet. They had monads, breaths of the one breath, and as impersonal as the source from which they proceeded. They had bodies, or rather shadows of bodies, which were sinless, hence karmaless. Therefore, as there was no kamaloka, least of all nirvana or even devakan, for the souls of men who had no personal egos, there could be no intermediate periods between the incarnations. Like the phoenix, primordial man resurrected out of his old into a new body. Each time, and with each new generation, he became more solid, more physically perfect, agreeably with the evolutionary law, which is the law of nature. Death came with a complete physical organism, and with it moral decay. This explanation shows one more old religion agreeing in its symbology with the universal doctrine. Elsewhere, the oldest Persian traditions, the relics of Mazdaism of the still older Magians, are given, and some of them explained. Mankind did not issue from one solitary couple, nor was there ever a first man, whether Adam or Yima, but a first mankind. It may or may not be meditated polygenism. Once that both creation, ex nihilo, an absurdity, and a superhuman creator or creators, a fact, are made away with by science, polygenism presents no more difficulties or inconveniences, rather fewer from a scientific point of view, than monogenism does. Nevertheless, it is as scientific as any other claim. For in his introduction to Knots and Gliddon's Types of Mankind, Agassiz declares his belief in an indefinite number of primordial races of men created separately, and remarks that, whilst in every zoological province animals are of different species, man, in spite of the diversity of his races, always forms one and the same human being." Unquote. Occultism defines and limits the number of primordial races to 7 because of the 7 progenitors, or prajapatis, the evolvers of beings. These are neither gods nor supernatural beings, but advanced spirits from another and lower planet, reborn on this one, and given birth in their turn in the present round to present humanity. This doctrine is again corroborated by one of its echoes, the Gnostic. In their Anthropology and Genesis of Man, they taught that a certain company of 7 angels formed the first men, who were no better than senseless, gigantic, shadowy forms, a mere wriggling worm, within brackets, ! Writes Irenaeus, who takes as usual the metaphor for reality. Subsection D. The septenary in the exoteric works. We may now examine other ancient scriptures and see whether they contain the septenary classification, and if so, to what degree. As much, if not much more, even than in the Jewish Bible, scattered about in the thousands of Sanskrit texts, some still unopened, others yet unknown, as well as in all the Puranas, the numbers 7 and 49, 7 by 7, play a most prominent part. They are found from the 7 creations in chapter 1 down to the 7 rays of the sun at the final pralaya, which expand into 7 suns and absorb the material of the whole universe. Thus the Matsya Purana has, for the sake of promulgating the Vedas, Vishnu in the beginning of a kalpa related to Manu the story of Narasimha and the events of 7 kalpas. Then again the same Purana shows that in all the Manvantaras classes of rishis appear by 7 and 7, and having established a code of law and morality depart to felicity. The rishis representing many other things besides living sages. Note: these are the 7 persons by whom in the several Manvantaras, says Parasara, created beings having been protected. Because the whole world has been pervaded by the energy of the deity, he is entitled Vishnu, from the root vis, to enter, or pervade, for all the gods, the Manus, the 7 rishis, the sons of the Manu, the Indras, all are but the impersonated potencies, Vibhutaya, of Vishnu, from Vishnu Purana. Vishnu is the universe, and the universe itself is divided in the Rig Veda into 7 regions, which ought to be a sufficient authority for the Brahmins at all events. End of note. In hymn 19, verse 53 of Atharva Veda, Dr. Muir's translation, one reads, "The mysterious number is once more prominent in the no less mysterious Maruts." The Vayu Purana shows, and Harivansa corroborates, that the Martus, the oldest as the most incomprehensible of all the secondary or lower gods in the Rig Veda, are born in every Manvantara round 7 times 7, or 49, that in each Manvantara 4 times 7, or 28, they obtain emancipation, but their places are filled up by persons reborn in that character. What are the Maruts in their esoteric meaning, and who those persons reborn in that character? In the Rig and other Vedas, the Maruts are represented as the storm gods and the friends and allies of Indra. They are the sons of heaven and of earth. This led to an allegory that makes them the children of Shiva, the great patron of the yogis, the Mahayogi, the great ascetic, in whom is centered the highest perfection of austere penance and abstract meditation, by which the most unlimited powers are obtained, marvels and miracles are worked, the highest spiritual knowledge is acquired, and union with the great spirit of the universe is eventually gained. In the Rig Veda the name Shiva is unknown, but the god is called Rudra, which is a word used for Agni, the fire god, the Maruts being called therein his sons. In the Ramayana and the Puranas, their mother, Diti, the sister or complement of and a form of Aditi, anxious to obtain a son who would destroy Indra, is told by Kashyapa the sage that if with thoughts wholly pious and person entirely pure she carries the babe in her womb for 100 years, she will get such a son. But Indra foils her in the design. With his thunderbolt he divides the embryo in her womb into 7 portions, and then divides every such portion into 7 pieces again, which become the swift-moving deities, the Maruts. Note: in the Ramayana it is Balarama, Krishna's elder brother, who does it. End of note. These deities are only another aspect or a development of the Kumaras, who are the Rudras in their patronymic, like many others. Note: with regard to the origin of Rudra, it is stated in several Puranas that his spiritual progeny, created in him by Brahma, was not confined to either the 7 Kumaras or the 711 Rudras, etc., but comprehends infinite numbers of beings in person and equipments like their virgin father. Alarmed at their fierceness, numbers, and immortality, Brahma desires his son Rudra to form creatures of a different and mortal nature. Rudra, refusing to create, desists, etc. Hence Rudra is the first rebel. See Linga, Vayu, Matsya, and other Puranas. End of note. Diti being Aditi, unless the contrary is proven to us, Aditi, we say, or Akasha in her highest form, is the Egyptian 7-fold heaven. Every true occultist will understand what this means. Diti, we repeat, is the 6th principle of metaphysical nature, the buddhi of Akasha. Diti, the mother of the Maruts, is one of her terrestrial forms, made to represent, at one and the same time, the divine soul in the ascetic and the divine aspirations of mystic humanity toward deliverance from the webs of Maya and final bliss in consequence. Indra, now degraded because of the Kali Yuga, when such aspirations are no more general but have become abnormal through a general spread of ahamkara, the feeling of egotism, self or I-amness, and ignorance, was in the beginning one of the greatest gods of the Hindu pantheon, as the Rig Veda shows. Suradipa, the chief of the gods, has fallen down from Jishnu, the leader of the celestial host, the Hindu Saint Michael, to an opponent of asceticism, the enemy of every holy aspiration. He is shown married to Yandri, Yandrani, the personification of Yandriyaka, the evolution of the element of senses, whom he married because of her voluptuous attractions, after which he began sending celestial female demons to excite the passions of holy men, yogis, and to beguile them from the potent penances which he dreaded. Therefore Indra, now characterized as the god of the firmament, the personified atmosphere, is in reality the cosmic principle Mahat, and the 5th human, Manas, in its dual aspect, as connected with Buddhi, and as allowing himself to be dragged down by his karma principle, the body of passions and desires. This is demonstrated by Brahma telling the conquered god that his frequent defeats were due to karma, and were a punishment for his licentiousness and the seduction of various nymphs. It is in this latter character that he seeks to save himself from destruction, to destroy the coming babe destined to conquer him. The babe, of course, allegorizing the divine and steady will of the yogi, determined to resist all such temptations and thus destroy the passions within his earthly personality. Indra succeeds again because flesh conquers spirit. Diti is shown frustrated in the Dvapara Yuga, during that period when the 4th race was flourishing. He divides the embryo of new divine adeptship, begotten once more by the ascetics of the Aryan 5th race, into 7 portions, a reference not alone to the 7 sub-races of the new root race, in each of which there will be a Manu, but also to the 7 degrees of adeptship, and then each portion into 7 pieces, alluding to the Manu rishis of each root race and even sub-race. Note: notwithstanding the terrible and evidently purposed confusion of Manus, rishis, and their progeny in the Puranas, one thing is made clear: there have been and there will be 7 rishis in every root race, called also Manvantara in the sacred books, as there are 14 Manus in every round, the presiding gods, the rishis and sons of the Manus, being identical. See Book 3, Chapter 1 of Vishnu Purana. 6 Manvantaras are given, the 7th being our own in the Vishnu Purana. The Vayu Purana furnishes the nomenclature of the sons of the 14 Manus in every Manvantara, and the sons of the 7 sages or rishis. The latter are the progeny of the progenitors of mankind. All the Puranas speak of the 7 Prajapatis of this period. Round. End of note. It does not seem difficult to perceive what is meant by the Maruts obtaining 4 times 7 emancipations in every Manvantara, and by those persons who, being reborn in that character of the Maruts in the esoteric meaning, fill up their places. The Maruts represent a. the passions that storm and rage within every candidate's breast when preparing for an ascetic life. This mystically. B. the occult potencies concealed in the manifold aspects of Akasha's lower principles, her body or Stula Sharira, representing the terrestrial lower atmosphere of every inhabited globe, this mystically and siderally. C. actual conscious existences, being of a cosmic and psychic nature. At the same time, Maruts is, in occult parlance, one of the names given to those egos of great adepts who have passed away, and who are known also as Nirmanakayas, of those egos for whom, since they are beyond illusion, there is no Devakan, and who, having either voluntarily renounced it for the good of mankind or not yet reached Nirvana, remain invisible on earth. Therefore are the Maruts shown firstly as the sons of Shiva Rudra, the patron yogi, whose 3rd eye mystically must be acquired by the ascetic before he becomes an adept. Then in their cosmic character as the subordinates of Indra and his opponents, variously. Note on the Maruts. Chaksuba was the Manu of the 6th period, 3rd round and 3rd race, in which Indra was Manojava, Mantradruma in the Bhagavata Purana. As there is a perfect analogy between the great round, Mahakalpa, each of the 7 rounds, and each of the 7 great races in every one of the rounds, therefore Indra of the 6th period, or 3rd round, corresponds to the close of the 3rd race at the time of the fall, or separation of sexes. Rudra, as the father of the Maruts, has many points to contact with Indra, the Marutvan, or Lord of the Maruts. To receive a name, Rudra is said to have wept for it. Brahma called him Rudra, but he wept 7 times more, and so obtained 7 other names, of which he uses 1 during each period. End of note. The 4 times 7 emancipations have a reference to the 4 rounds and the 4 races that preceded ours, in each of which Marut Jivas, monads, have been reborn and have obtained final liberation, if they have only availed themselves of it. Instead of which, preferring the good of mankind, which would struggle still more hopelessly in the meshes of ignorance and misery, were it not for this extraneous help, they are reborn over and over again in that character, and thus fill up their own places. Who they are on earth, every student of occult science knows, and he also knows that the Maruts are Rudras, among whom also the family of Tvashtri, a synonym of Vishvakarman, the great patron of the initiates, is included. This gives us an ample knowledge of their true nature. The same for the septenary division of cosmos and human principles. The Puranas, along with other sacred texts, teem with allusions to this. First of all, the mundane egg which contained Brahma, or the universe, was externally invested with the 7 natural elements, at first loosely enumerated as water, air, fire, ether, and 3 secret elements, in Book 1. Then the world is said to be encompassed on every side by 7 elements, also within the egg, as explained. The universe is encompassed on every side above and below by the Andakataha, the shell of the egg of Brahma. Around the shell flows water, which is surrounded with fire, fire by air, air by ether, ether by the origin of the elements, ahamkara, the latter by universal mind, intellect in the texts. See Book 2, Chapter 7 of Vishnu Purana. It relates to spheres of being as much as to principles. Prithivi is not our earth, but the world, the solar system, and means the broad, the wide. In the Vedas, the greatest of all authorities, though needing the key to read it correctly, 3 terrestrial and 3 celestial earths are mentioned as having been called into existence simultaneously with Bhumi, our earth. We have often been told that 6, not 7, appears to be the number of spheres, principles, etc. We answer that there are in fact only 6 principles in man, since his body is no principle, but the covering, the shell thereof. So with the planetary chain. Speaking of which, esoterically, the earth, as well as the 7th, or rather 4th plane, one that stands as the 7th if we count from the first triple kingdom of the elementals that begin the formation, may be left out of consideration, being to us the only distinct body of the 7. The language of occultism is varied, but supposing that 3 earths only instead of 7 are meant in the Vedas, what are those 3, since we still know of but 1? Evidently there must be an occult meaning in the statement under consideration. Let us see. The earth that floats on the universal ocean of space, which Brahma divides in the Puranas into 7 zones, is Prithivi, the world divided into 7 principles. A cosmic division looking metaphysical enough, but in reality physical in its occult effects. Many kalpas later, our earth is mentioned, and in its turn is divided into 7 zones. See the Puranas, on that same law of analogy that guided ancient philosophers. After which one finds on it 7 continents, 7 isles, 7 oceans, 7 seas and rivers, 7 mountains, and 7 climates, etc., etc., etc. Note. In the Vishnu Purana, Book 2, Chapter 4, it is stated that the earth, with its continents, mountains, oceans, and exterior shell, is 50 crores, 500 millions, of yojanas in extent, to which the commentator remarks that this comprises the planetary spheres. For the diameter of the 7 zones and oceans, each ocean being of the same diameter as the content it encloses, and each successive continent being twice the diameter of that which precedes it, amounts to but 2 crores or 54 lakhs, etc. Whenever any contradictions in different Puranas occur, they have to be ascribed to differences of kalpas and the like. The like ought to read occult meaning, which explanation is withheld by the commentator who wrote for exoteric, sectarian purposes, and was misunderstood by the translator for various other reasons, the least of which is ignorance of the esoteric philosophy. End of note. Furthermore, it is not only in the Hindu scriptures and philosophy that one finds references to the 7 earths, but in the Persian, Phoenician, Chaldean, and Egyptian cosmogonies, and even in rabbinical literature. The phoenix, called by the Hebrews Onik, from Phenok, Enoch, symbol of a secret cycle and initiation, and by the Turks Kerkes, lives 1,000 years, after which, kindling a flame, it is self-consumed. And then, reborn from itself, it lives another 1,000 years, up to 7 times 7. It lives another 1,000 years, up to 7 times 7, when comes the day of judgment. The phoenix, connected with the solar cycle of 600 years, with ciphers taken out, or with more added according to which cycle is meant, the Western cycle of the Greeks and other nations is a generic symbol for several kinds of cycles. Fuller details will be given in the section on kalpas and cycles. See Book of Ali, Russian translation. The 7 times 7, 49, are transparent allegory and an allusion to the 49 manus, the 7 rounds, and the 7 times 7 human cycles in each round on each globe. The Kerkes and the Onik stand for a race cycle, and the mystical tree Ababel, the father tree in the Quran, shoots out new branches and vegetation at every resurrection of the Kerkes or phoenix, the day of judgment, meaning a minor pralaya. See Esoteric Buddhism. The author of the Book of God and the Apocalypse believes that the phoenix is very plainly the same as the simurg, the Persian ruk, and the account which is given us of this last bird yet more decisively establishes the opinion that the death and revival of the phoenix exhibit the successive destruction and reproduction of the world, which may be believed to be effected by the agency of a fiery deluge, and a watery one in turn. When the Simurg was asked her age, she informed Kaherman that this world is very ancient, for it has been already 7 times replenished with beings different from men, and 7 times depopulated. Note: the tense is the past, because the book is allegorical and has to veil the truths contained. End of note. That the age of the human race in which we now are is to endure 7,000 numbers, and that she herself has seen 12 of these revolutions, and knew not how many more she had to see. Unquote from Oriental Collections, Volume 2, page 119. The above, however, is no new statement. From Bailly in the last century down to Dr. Kinnelly in this one, these facts have been noticed by several writers, but now a connection can be established between the Persian oracle and the Nazarene prophet. Says the author of the Book of God, quote, the Simurg is in reality the same as the winged Sink of the Hindus and the Sphinx of the Egyptians. It is said that the former will appear at the end of the world as a monstrous lion bird. From these the rabbins have borrowed their mythos of an enormous bird, sometimes standing on the earth, sometimes walking in the ocean, while its head props the sky. And with the symbol they have also adopted the doctrine to which it relates. They teach that there are to be 7 successive renewals of the globe, that each reproduced system will last 7,000 years, within brackets question mark, and that the total duration of the universe will be 49,000 years. This opinion, which involves the doctrine of the pre-existence of each renewed creature, they may either have learned during the Babylonian captivity, or it may have been part of the primeval religion which their priests had preserved from remote times. Taken from page 176. It shows rather that the initiated Jews borrowed, and their non-initiated successors, the Talmudists, lost the sense and applied the 7 rounds and the 49 races, etc., to the wrong end. Not only their priests, but those of every other country. The Gnostics, whose various teachings are the many echoes of the one primitive and universal doctrine put the same numbers under another form, in the mouth of Jesus in the very occult Pistis Sophia. We say more, even the Christian editor or author of Revelation has preserved this tradition and speaks of the 7 races, 4 of which, with part of the 5th, are gone, and 2 have to come. It is stated as plainly as could be stated in chapter 17, verses 9 and 10. Thus saith the angel, And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. Who, acquainted in the least with the symbolical language of old, will fail to discern in the 5 kings that have fallen the 4 root races that were, and part of the 5th, the one that is, and in the other that is not yet come, the 6th and 7th coming root races, as also the sub-races of this our present race. Another still more forcible allusion to the 7 rounds and the 49 root races